Hey there. Before we get to the show, I want to cut in with a brief announcement. Not here to sell anything this time, but rather to reinforce a policy for this show and for lots of others on the network that doesn't really get stated very often, this policy. Recent political events here in America have a lot of people kind of scared and dismayed. And there's a very real likelihood that things are going to get pretty bad for marginalized groups of people based on things like race, religion, sexual orientation, gender here in the coming days and likely years. While none of our shows are explicitly political, we are. And it's going to be impossible to keep our views from poking through in the face of this kind of changing climate. We're complete people with views and convictions, and we have no interest in doing shows where we can't bring our entire selves to the table. Moreover, we want to reiterate that creating a welcoming environment for people is, to use some kind of shitty business speak, a core value of the network. We will not tolerate any kind of harassment of people, especially based on the aforementioned criteria of race, religion, sexual orientation, and gender in our community. This isn't a political question in our eyes. It's more of a question of humanity and not the kind that you get from invading people. I don't have a URL to direct you to and nothing to sell. Again, just an expectation to set. We'll speak our minds about these issues and likely won't respond to people who ask us to stop. We've been down that road before. It's just who we are. Additionally, please continue to be cool. We've been super lucky with this community so far, and protecting and reinforcing it. It's our number one goal. The aim is to make things easier for each other, not harder. So here's the show. Thanks for listening to that. I hope everybody's doing okay. We're going to be here, and we'll be here.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
You are a dragon. More dragon than I. A deserter could hope for no better place to die.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
My name is Callum.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a dragon, the true dragon favorite.
And this week, there can only be one true dragon. This week, we are talking about Archdragon Peak. And as you heard, we're joined by Callum, also known as Aegon of Astora. Hi, Callum.
Hi, Kole.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I've been a big fan of the show for a while, so the pleasure really is all mine.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, we've been meaning to have you on for a while. I'm glad we were able to finally make it work and have things. This season has been a strange one to schedule because we schedule further out usually than most people plan for because of our particular neuroses about planning. And then so this is the season where I've had people who have kind of agreed to be on the show, and then when I've circled back to them, they fell off the game. So that happened a few times. So thank you very much for being able to, for being available, and also just in general for everything you do. Yeah. Really do appreciate it. How can you talk a little bit about kind of your position in the community, how you got into Dark Souls, how people might know you, etc.?
Sure. Those three things are very much entangled for me. So I guess I'll just go back to start with how I got into the game, while trying to be mindful that this isn't Don't Give Up Skeleton, so I'll try not to go on for too long. But yeah, I starting in around 2011, I started realizing while in the midst of an undergrad education in business that I didn't really want to do that for a living. And so I found myself in the position, being very fortunate and having an interest in science and technology, to start studying science and technology studies at graduate school. And I went into that program with a very sort of, I guess, naive perspective on the history of science and technology, these notions of grand heroic narratives and whatnot. And when I when I first started, it was a real struggle for me because I had this conception of history that of everything being sort of unproblematic and, great men, European men of history doing great heroic things. And then I came to graduate school and learned that history is a bit more complicated than that. And so it was around that time in mid 2013 when I first played Dark Souls. And I struggled my way, as I'm sure everyone does, through my first playthrough. And it wasn't until my second playthrough, and when I also purchased the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, that I started to realize that Dark Souls is very much, it presents a conception of history that is very much like the one I was learning about in graduate school, whereby what's actually left to the historical record has an enormous impact on what the history actually ends up being. And in the case of Artorias in particular, Miyazaki gave that interview with IGN way back in the day when he was being asked about the contradictions between the story of the base game and the DLC as it relates to Artorias. And Miyazaki basically said there is no contradiction. That's just sort of how history works. And so I came to the game from this perspective of someone who was struggling to sort of wrap his head around history in such a way that the game helped me understand history, the history of my studies, and on the other hand, that my studies actually helped me understand the game. And so taking that sort of critical theory approach to understanding the game and its story, I decided that I would start doing videos. I didn't expect that anyone would give a damn about that approach. And I started with my first series was called Dark Souls 2, Let's Talk Lore. But it was meant to be more of a dialogical approach to understanding the story, but it didn't really have any viewers, so it was more monologue the entire time. And I really didn't actually start getting many viewers until I applied this approach to Bloodborne. And yeah, I think it's something like 40, 50 hour long playthrough of Bloodborne that I have where in each area, rather than looking at the game as a story, and this is especially applicable as you guys have discussed throughout the season to Dark Souls 3, rather than looking at the game as, or the lore of the game as being able to, as us being able to actually piece things together in a way that makes sense, I just kind of disregard that goal altogether and just sort of go through each area and look at things and talk about things and bring that sort of critical academic perspective from my studies to bear on the game and vice versa. And lots of people comment and help us out throughout that. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah. I've watched a bunch of your videos, your early stuff, and I've seen you also currently do a YouTube podcast now with Redgrave and Richard Pilbeam and Ashen Hollow, correct?
Yes, it's called Beside the Bonfire, no relation to to Bonfireside Chat.
If we actually like thought that people who used bonfires in their name for anything were somehow biting our stees, like we'd spend all day thinking that like it is the thing on shirts. So we do not know, we do not have a copyright on the concept of a bonfire. But
that's Gary's response. Callum, if you could open up that envelope, you will notice that you have been served.
No. Just to be clear, it's not my podcast. It's the Ashen Hollows podcast.
Yeah.
So I have no liability in that.
Yeah. No.
So that's why you got me on here. Dang
it. But, I saw that when I was looking up stuff and saw, because people who listen to this, I remember Richard, who's been on a couple times and is really great. Also, has kind of a unique perspective. One of the things I like about what you and Richard do are those kind of I think you guys both kind of take a kind of a unique way of looking at the series and looking at the games. Richard with he does that kind of you do that academic perspective you just mentioned. Richard, who does that like very kind of focused on visual iconography, statuary, things like that.
Yeah. Richard's is much more focused. Mine is very all over the place, where I just sort of walk through and then, I do prepare things in advance of every episode to talk about, but occasionally, so like, for example, we're really far behind just because I had to take a break for, real life things. But when we got to the Undead Settlement, I was walking around and I was just like, oh, well, I guess we could talk about Foucauldian ideas of discipline and power and things like that. And so I just kind of throw things out there but that's sort of my academic style as well. Whereas Richard is very focused and concise and brilliant. And so yeah, that's why I have them on my show.
It's one of those things where one of the things that continuously impresses me about the series is that there is room for all of those. I've said it a bunch of times, but this kind of cottage industry that's grown up around it, where there is room for so many perspectives on this kind of single thing. Like, it's so rich, where like you can just you can come at this from so many different angles and succeed at that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the thing about, like, rather than getting hung up on how difficult it is to actually piece together a coherent story in the games, in Dark Souls 3 in particular, I just sort of come at it from the perspective of, here's this game that can be used as sort of a educational platform in many respects, for exploring what each thing means in the game, but also, reflecting that back on ourselves as well as, society more broadly, and using those gaps as a way of sort of, teaching people about things that they wouldn't otherwise be interested in learning about. Yeah. So it's an educational Trojan horse in a way, but, in a nice educational manner as opposed to.
Yes, there was an evil Trojan horse, like the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
Not enough good things are said about that specific, ruse. Maybe that's they to get invaded. So we're real happy to have you. And this, as Kole mentioned, this episode we're talking about Archdragon Peak. Kole, what did we do previously?
Well, last time we kind of reached the climax of the game, a little bit anyway. We ascended through the Grand Archives to the top of Lothric Castle, defeating the princes there, Lorien and Lothric, and obtained their cinders, unlocking our way to the end of the game through Firelink Shrine. But there are a couple of things left to do before we actually fire that particular arrow, namely, again, Archdragon Peak.
Yes, Archdragon Peak. We're also, for people who are listening, we're going to do the first DLC before we hit the end game, and during our end game episode is when we're going to do the kind of NPC roundup and hit everybody who we haven't already talked about,
right?
As well. So we are going to wrap up those kind of loose ends, but this was definitely the biggest and most obvious of the loose ends that we have not touched yet, and it's appropriate to save it right before the end game because of the difficulty level. I think.
Yes.
This is kind of end game content.
Mm-hmm.
So
is there a Dark Souls area that is more well hidden than this one?
Maybe Ash Lake.
Like Ash Lake is very hidden.
Yeah.
That's very, very hidden. Getting the key to the Upper Cathedral Ward, I think, is pretty tricky. You're still just finding an item, but the relation between those areas and kind of making the intuitive leap to do the thing you have to do to get down there. But this is at least as hidden as anything else.
Yeah.
More so than I would say, going back to the asylum.
Yeah.
At least as hidden as Ash Lake. Yeah, it is. This is tricky to get to. I'm not ashamed to admit that, like, I missed it on my first run through, or would have. I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to fight the boss. Let's look up and see what things I've missed. and texted Allison, who had imported the game and generally explores these things, very thoroughly and is smarter than I am. And I was able to, to say like, hey, what have I missed? And she's like, oh, did you get to Archdragon Peak? And then Archdragon what? And
who shot who in the what now? Yeah.
And it's such an interesting, the way you get here is such an interesting intersection of a multiplayer mechanic and a single player thing, because that was the purpose of gestures, like taking gestures and kind of turning them into PvE considerations has been seen before. Like you do it in Bloodborne, obviously, with the Mensis, or the Nightmare of Mensis tumor thing. Yeah, the make contact, but it's pretty rare. Like we don't really do it, and this is probably the most significant and weighty intersection of gesturing, which is just kind of used to taunt people in PvP usually, and the actual in-game world.
Yeah. So there's some lore about this that probably would be useful for anybody who hasn't done a deep dive on Dark Souls 1. I know people like that do listen. So Dark Souls 1 opens up with a story about the Archdragons, or these eternal dragons, these beings that have stone scales. They're immortal, and they presided over this kind of world before the world, before the first flame really got things started, as we know it. The Kingdom of Lordran, which we see in Orlando here, was built by Gwyn, and his compatriots after they defeated these dragons in this war, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this, and from Anor Londo, you can actually see Archdragon Peak. This kind of citadel, it's off in the distance.
In Dark Souls, in Dark Souls 3.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not in Dark Souls 1, which would have been amazing planet. This is where this kind of place takes place in Dark Souls 3, or what it kind of is this place where people go, kind of warriors go to become a dragon. Like, it has this kind of monastery monk kind of sense. And it is full of people who have either had their development kind of arrested and failed to become dragon, these serpent men, as well as this is where Gwyn's firstborn ended up. And there are tons of statues of Gwyn's firstborn here. They're destroyed since he has been stricken from the records after a betrayal in that war. And we're going to get to that when we get to the ultimate boss of this area. There are two bosses.
Yeah.
But the place in the world, that my understanding of this is that this is kind of like a warrior's order. You know, this is something you pray to. The way we get here, which we alluded to without actually saying what it is that you find this area near Aerithel Dungeon where these dragons and other warriors have made this gesture, are sitting on yoga mats and are facing the shrine. And if you make that gesture as well, which is this kind of meditation gesture, you get kind of teleported here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, if I may, can we talk about that setup a little bit? Because in advance of this episode, I did a whole lot of research and testing on this area because it wasn't really an area I knew very well. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to say on this episode will be prefaced with, I don't know if this means anything, but...
Oh, sure.
And so I don't know if this means anything, but when we come across that spot that Gary just mentioned, where, you know, it has there are a bunch of yoga mats and there's the one yoga mat that we're supposed to go on, we find that there's a corpse of a dragonkin, which I believe is where we get the headstone from initially.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there are two Lothric knights who they have their heads sort of slouched down in the same way that happens to us when we get that cinematic. So there are two Lothric knights wearing the red capes. There are two sellswords, and there are two deserters, so those hollows from the high wall. The sellswords and the Lothric knights have their heads slouched over, and the deserters are sort of in a fetal position. So again, I don't know if that means anything. It might have something to do with what will happen later with Hawkwood, but yeah, I'm not sure.
So a couple notable things here. You teleport to this area, making it kind of a rare, a rare beast, right? And you do so by meditating, and there are item descriptions that kind of indicate that when members of this order meditate, they actually envision this place. They envision the Archdragon Peak. So, and also when you teleport there, it is kind of in a different time of day, different weather, different everything. Even though, you know, these 2 points are visible from each other, the overall sky couldn't look any different. And so, go ahead.
Sorry, Kole. The skybox is actually completely unique in the sense that, like, obviously there's something that happens to the skybox later on, but together with basically everything having to do with Irithyll and Firelink Shrine, Archdragon Peak is the only place that doesn't get the dark sign in the sky, basically. It never changes.
Right. And to me, the way that I'm interpreting this is, I don't know if you're physically traveling to this place so much as projecting to it. Maybe at a different time, different place kind of things. Like that, good.
Or I was going to say, like, that's kind of how it feels to me. And I didn't initially think that when I first came here, but I do think that with the kind of magical, you know, transition to untended graves that happens in this game, like, there is precedent in this game for, you know, kind of non-portal, heavily signified traveling through dimensions, times, mindscapes, kind of whatever, you know, it needs to be. And that meditation line, I keyed on it as well, given that it is literally, you know, that's what you're doing. That's what the pose is.
Yeah.
You know, so like projecting is a good way, I think, to put it. What that means for where this is at, either chronologically, because we know where it's at spatially. Like,
yeah,
we can
you can
see
it,
it.
and you can see Anor Londo from there too.
Yeah, but it's not, again, that skybox, and the fact that it doesn't change with the dark sign, what Kellen brought up, is significant in maybe placing this in a different time or somehow protected from the cataclysm that's happening to the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My position is pretty much the same in that, I know it, like, I believe it's a physical place. Like, again, you can see it. But I also don't think if we are there physically, we're not traveling there physically, we're teleporting. But I think it's more likely that it's sort of a Dreamlands-esque place, sort of like, many of the areas in Bloodborne.
Yeah. Actually, the little scene that you teleport there from with all of those kind of dead bodies, the dragon statue, and then those kind of people who are slumped over, it's kind of a mini Mensis kind of situation. It's Mensis babies.
Yeah, I didn't even make that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take Mensis babies and make my dreams come true. Literally.
Thank you. Alley-oop.
Well, and sorry, Gary, go on.
No, there was there's no postscript to that non-joke.
I was going to say that if there are any doubters about, this suggestion or this thing that we're bringing up, a counterexample would be, or maybe not a counterexample, but another perspective to look at this from is after we defeat Vort way back at the High Wall, and, you walk up to the end of this path that is basically no longer there. And you raise the banner, and the Batwing demons come and carry you over to the Undead Settlement. They won't do that after you've gone the first time and lit the bonfire. They no longer carry you. If you do that, it just sort of teleports you there, and because there's a bonfire there. And so if they have the animation in the game for that, then there's really no reason why they wouldn't also have an animation for this journey that we're taking. And what's more is that it fades to black, and we're forced to only pay attention to the sound, and we're not actually seeing anything happen. So it seems pretty open and shut to me that we're not, at the very least, that we're not physically traveling there.
Yeah, this isn't a series that is shy about showing a gigantic thing picking you up and taking you somewhere.
Totally. Which so. And to my mind, I'm pretty convinced about that. I don't know exactly, the fact that this is projecting that this is kind of a space in the mind. I'm not sure whether I particularly like it. Like, it doesn't matter whether I like it or not, that's the case. But it does feel like there's a temptation, and I understand that the Dreamlands are not unreal. Like, the Dreamlands are a real place. Like, if anybody's versed, like, I'm pretty versed in like that idea, but it does make it feel less kind of significant if it is like a mindscape. If it's somewhere where you're just kind of teleporting to, that's fine. But if we were going to just kind of like a mindscape to go do this thing, it feels disconnected in a way that I think I would have thought it was pretty awesome if a dragon came and picked you up for doing this. Like, I mean, like, I don't know. I think that would have been at least a little bit neater to me. Like, this has a feeling of muddying the waters a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely creates a lot of unnecessarily nonsensical muddiness when it comes to the NPCs that we meet there and the items that we can get. Like, we can get items from them there, but then when we want the rest of their items, we have to go elsewhere for it. And that
it's weird. So we show up there. It's a beautiful like skybox. Like, it does something that the game, like something that Dark Souls 2 does really well, which is like the courage to have something be pretty. Like, it's not ominous. It's just like a beautiful sunny day. Similar to the Dragon Aerie or Majula or something like that, where it's just kind of like, oh, this is very pleasant looking. And like,
we actually see the sun and the moon in the sky.
Yeah,
at once.
Yeah. That kind of summer, early fall, late summer kind of thing that I love so much, that kind of time. And you kind of move through here. We find those little stones. That is a religion that is escaping my mind right now.
Oh, the stone stacks, like almost little cairn kind of things.
Yeah. That there's I think I first saw that in one of Richard's video where he pointed out what that is exactly, and I feel embarrassed for. They're
present in the fishing hamlet. I know that.
I think that's where I've seen them. Yeah. So I'm talking about that. On our way up, and we're introduced to the kind of main enemy here, which are these serpent men.
Yeah.
That are it seems pretty clear these are probably related to the Sen's Fortress Serpent Men, even though they seem kind of on harder times. Like the fact that they cover themselves up, that they're more slunched over. Slunched.
Yeah.
Slouched,
I get it.
Slouched over / slumped
Slunch
over.
works. Gary, you be you. Yeah. Okay. Own it.
Thank you. They're snacking on Slunchables, and they're just but they seem like a little bit more pathetic to me than those proud kind of warriors we had before.
It's a posture thing too. The previous Serpent Warrior guys were very upright when they attacked. These guys they most readily evoke the
elephant.
Well, yeah. But there's something about them that reminds me of the Beastmen that you find in Bernie Town.
Old Yarnum.
Yeah, Old Yarnum. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bernie Town, the town that was burned.
The Beast Patients.
Yeah. reminds me of those guys a little bit because they are shrouded, and that actually makes it land a lot harder when they do these attacks with their gigantic necks, or when they fire their breath, and you actually like see, these are snake men who are like concealing themselves.
Or the ones with the two daggers who, when they're holding their daggers out in like sort of a parry stance, don't attack them unless you have an unparryable weapon. Because the craziest riposte in the game where they sort of put you in their mouth, throw you up into the air, and then like sort of slam you down. And they also do some really nice fancy like gymnast flips as well that are
This kind of lack of stature, this kind of patheticness to them, though, really makes sense if they are, what I kind of believe is people who were, because there's so much precedent in this game and the series for people turning into dragons. This is an epicenter of at least one path of that, which is, this warrior path, this kind of the purity of turning into a dragon. It's not specifically to avert the curse like it was in Dark Souls 2. It is like a warrior's way. And the idea of them kind of getting partway there and kind of fucking up, like this kind of, I'm always going to have a place in my heart for like a half transformed being.
Yeah.
Like why should, kill me? Like why?
See a Drider.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a Drider. Perfect. Like that kind of thing I'm really into. And the fact that they are kind of pathetic because they don't have this glory of a dragon. Like when the player turns into a dragon, when you use the head and torso stone, like you look dignified.
Yeah.
Like your posture gets better. These guys do not look dignified. And that's the kind of the thing that I take away from them.
Yeah. How do you square that away with the stuff that's in the text that says that these man serpent people are kind of the failed descendants of the everlasting dragons? Because that to me lines up with, like, puts them more in line with the primordial serpents, almost. Like, are all of these just things that failed in becoming? Like are those ideas mutually exclusive, or are they compatible, do you think?
I don't know. Do you have a good answer for that, Callum?
Not exactly, but the guide, and the guide is another one of those caveats I must offer, in that I know in the first or second episode of the series, you guys talked a little bit about the guide and how it was a little bit disappointing compared to those that were done by Future Press.
Yes.
So I'm not entirely sure what to think about the guide myself, just because I feel like, whereas with the Future Press guides, we knew at least, that at least two of the authors really understood the importance of specificity when it comes to, what you actually, the text you use to describe things. I don't feel like that's necessarily in this guide. But with all that said, the guide describes them as a lesser form of dragonkin. But beyond that, I don't really know.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like, I don't have a way to square them. I also think that I can't necessarily square all of, because it is in text that there is a, like, turning into dragons is a warrior's way kind of thing. I think it's on the Calamity Ring. There's a thing about the Order of the Dragon, and that being like they're seeking greater challenges. This is what Hawkwood is doing here. He wants to become the true dragon. So they both exist.
Yeah.
To me, that feels like, again, and I don't like I actually I like this area. Like I don't want to spend too much time slagging off on it, not least of which lest I become even more of a parody of myself. But like to me that dissonance has more to do with the narrative, like having a lot of threads that lead to the same place in the narrative.
Yeah,
so like having like a bunch of reasons why people might turn into dragons or be half dragons in the game is kind of a problem with the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, and see also giants, see also anything related to gods, kings, lords. Nouns are fuzzy, and at a certain point, we just have to be like, if it makes for a more satisfying read, I can kind of rack my focus a little bit. Like
it gets nowny wowny with the half dragons, because if we do tie it into the primordial serpents, which like I saw that connection as well. I don't know what to put at the end of that Mad Lib, though.
Neither do I.
Like, if that's the case, why? What does that mean? I have no idea. Like, what is again, it's one of those things with connections. Like, oh, okay, it's connected to the primordial serpents. We have a connection between Cath and the Sable Church of Londor, and a connection between Frampt and Lothric. But what do those things have to do with Archdragon Peak and this Order of Warriors? Like it has a little bit of that feeling of how like Logan and Seath are connected to every area in the world. And so when I think of it as these people being on that path to becoming warriors, given the fact that we do find all of those people who are presumably or possibly projecting here, or like were projecting here and their bodies died, like Mikolash at the yoga mats. I prefer that explanation because it doesn't connect to every other single lore thread in the game.
Yeah. And there's also precedence in the series. I mean, both major entries before this, had the same thing where warriors
had the Dragon Bros. It's another one of those intersections of a PvP mechanic and a PvE thing, given kind of like a PvP mechanic being elevated to a PvP thing, which is like kind of interesting. Like it's neat, the idea that in that time when I was just speaking a Dragon Bro because I thought it was novel to breathe fire in Dark Souls 1, like I was actually on this kind of path that has this, them kind of recontextualizing that path I was on.
Yeah.
There's definitely an element of headcanon though to them being these pathetic kind of failed acolytes.
For me, I've that's the first time I've even considered that possibility. I've always looked at them as sort of just servants of whomever is in charge of this place, and I guess maybe that goes back to and depends on some sort of coherent connection between the Serpent Men in this game and the Serpent Men in Dark Souls 1, and I don't know if that connection actually exists, but I just thought of them as these people who are there sort of defending the Archdragon Peak and being there for your trials, because that's what this area seems to me in the same way that Dark Souls 2, the Dragon Shrine did post patch 1.1 in Scholar of the First Sin, that it's just a series of trials to see if you're worthy enough to walk the path of the dragon. Although in Dark Souls 2 that's not how it ended, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see that as well. Like them just being, they work for the Nameless King. Work for. It's not like they draw a paycheck and like clock in and stuff, but they serve the Nameless King and they are here as part of that trial. And that's kind of so I like that idea too, because when we get to the place where you're trying to get the sparkling torso stone at the top of that, like that is a gauntlet that feels like a gauntlet. Like it feels like you're joining a gang and you have to walk down a line where everyone hits you with a bar of soap in a bag.
I've got a lot to say about that later too. Yeah. So
I love fighting these guys. Just as like regular kind of encounter composition kind of elements. They're really, really fun. Not only because of that awesome parry that they do. I think this is an area where like the huge jumps in animation quality that we've seen in the bosses kind of has like trickled down into regular enemies for these guys. The fact that they have two arms and also a head that you have to keep track of makes them kind of tactically interesting to respond to. And I feel like they mix them up in a really satisfying way. Like I really, really dig these guys as combat elements.
One thing that really annoys me about them, though, and it's not really present until you get to the upper level, the Dragon King Mausoleum, is the fact that their heads and many of their weapons just sort of ignore walls.
Yeah.
That's one thing that drives me nuts about fighting these guys. But otherwise, I agree.
I think that like they are really. I think that part of what you maybe are picking up on, Kole, the part I would agree with, like the animation, the tactical element of the extra head doesn't do too much for me. Just given like we have seen the Serpentmen before, like that's been a thing. The thing that
they were so stiff before though. Like these guys are really fluid.
Yeah, they're super fluid. Like that. I guess like I don't disagree with you, but that didn't impress me that much. Like I mean, you're right. I just didn't.
Yeah, that's what I was
didn't
laughing
do it for
at.
me.
Yeah.
The part of it that I like is that they are, and I talked about this and I praised the series before for this, is it's like an enemy difficulty that scales. Like these guys are not, they're not the Axulons from the DLC.
Right.
Like even the big ones are fightable, and the smaller ones will go down in a couple hits. The way that they scale up the difficulty, similar to what they did in the Grand Archives, is through layout.
Right.
And this area is great at that, where it's like none of these guys are huge HP sponges. None of them have moves that are explicitly unfair. They're just going to come at you in configurations and numbers that make them a challenge, rather than just individually being like, oh, every time they hit you, they take 60% of your health.
Right.
You know, they're good fights because they're fair fights.
You could parry most of their attacks too. The only thing is that you can't backstab the large dragon. But yeah, or the large serpentmen rather. But everyone else can more or less be parried. So
they're good. They're good fair fights.
Yep.
Brett, and I'm real into these guys as well. Like I like them a lot too.
Yeah.
Mostly for that.
The gigantic ones with the chain axes.
Yeah, that's a really cool attack. I like those guys a lot.
Yeah.
On your way here, so you're not given a bonfire immediately when you get here. You have to kind of run through this little gauntlet, which I like as a testing kind of space.
Yes.
You run up this hill past a really useless shortcut, and and which I think probably used to be more useful, which we'll talk about, or possibly used to be more useful, which we'll talk about here in a second. You can pick up the ancient dragon great shield here, which we learn, the ancient dragons are ancestors of the man serpents here. They talk about this being painted on. The other thing that kind of muddies the waters to Cole's lore question earlier is I think that there's something in the text of this, and I'll have to look it up real quick, that says that this is a painting of a legend or something like that. What is there's something I remember reading this thing and thinking there was something in the text that made me think this was a historical record.
Yeah, it was. So let me pull this up here. I've got it right here. The painting is a result of an exquisite but painstaking technique. Lingering, undying traces of the ancient dragons can still be seen in their descendants, the man serpents, though they have fallen far from grace. So the technique is what's there. So it's portraying the ancient dragons that we only see remnants of in these dragon beasts that run, or the man serpents that walk around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird in that case if these are just descendants of the ancient dragons, which like it's kind of weird that we don't see any successful dragon warriors except for the the nameless king, like and possibly his steed. There's nobody here. If these are not the people projecting from the yoga mats, like there's nobody who projecting from the yoga mats. The only person we run into is Hawkwood. That's like literally the only person on the same quest, which is also kind of like weird and unsatisfying to me.
I have a possible explanation for that, but again, I don't personally like it, but it's the only thing I could come up with. And it relates once again to the yoga mats and how there are 3 pairs of NPCs there basically. So the best explanation I can come up with for that is that somehow Archdragon Peak only accepts contestants in pairs, and that we are paired with Hawkwood. That's the best
interesting
explanation I could come up with.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Even though, like, I'm sure if you kill Hawkwood, you can still come here and stuff. But it's kind of a cool idea. The or you were the pair of, like, depending on who you believe, like depending on when Ornstein showed up. When we'll talk about that. If you're following him, but I'm not totally sure. You go through this gauntlet after the bonfire, and we're introduced to our first boss. There are 2 bosses in this area. The ancient wyvern. Which is this another one of like this game for the game in the series has a lot of gimmick bosses between this and Yorm. and Wolnir. And this is one where I think we all can agree that like we miss the days when From would reward you for unusual, like killing a boss in a hard or unusual way.
Yeah.
Because you can totally just fight this guy. And it's way harder than it needs to be. It's a dragon fight, which there have only been a couple of those that have been really good. But you don't get anything special for it, for not taking the easy way out. And same thing with like fighting Yorm without using the Storm Ruler. Like I feel like you should get something for that, like a tail weapon equivalent. But it's just to prove you can do it. You know, fighting Ava invisibly, any of those things you can do. Like I wish those things were rewarded.
Yeah.
Have either of you guys killed the Ancient Wyvern by hand?
No.
I fought the second one that shows up. I don't know if it has the same boss.
That one has
same
lower
HP
defenses, I think. But even still, like earlier today, before I went off to teach, I went and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna clear out all of the rock lizards and I'm gonna take care of this Ancient Wyvern by hand. And then I hit him 2 or 3 times and I was just like, I don't have time for this.
It's real tedious. Like it's not.
It's
a good
really
fight.
tedious, yeah.
And it's because they don't want you to. They're doing kind of a new spin on the From Software. You know, Bed of Chaos, Executioner's Chariot, Dragon God, boss thing. You know, which I like these kind of twists on this, where you run this gauntlet. There's a huge path full of serpent men, giant serpent men, and everything. You run to get a better position on the Ancient Wyvern, to get up to the kind of scaffolding above him. And I didn't know that I needed to do like this is also a thing where I probably wouldn't have intuited that he would die in one shit. Tell
us what you really think, Gary.
Yeah, I'm sick. Leave me alone. Die in one drop attack. But there were just soapstone messages. So someone just said, go left. And I was like, all right, like, oh shit, like I can go left. And then it said need drop attack. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's probably just telling me a way to do a lot of damage. And then when his health bar just absolutely drained, I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's it then.
When you're playing offline, you actually find that it's not just the messages that are up on that platform. Like there's messages throughout the entire boss room that basically say try plunging attack.
So there's developer messages.
Yeah, so it's an interesting sort of, because what I was thinking earlier when you were talking about how you might have missed this area were it not for Allison letting you know about it. It's really easy to miss this area if you're playing offline, but once you're in the actual area, you benefit from not being online because the developer messages are much more prominent. So
yeah,
I thought that was kind of funny.
There's not a lot of chaff.
Or you use guidance or something like that to get all of them. But it kind of undercuts it to me that like the developer just tells you what to do, because it's the easiest of all of the gimmick bosses.
Yeah.
I think this little run is really, really easy. And like it has this kind of a thesis for both the bosses here where like I think they're cool from a painted on the side of a van perspective. Like running up to the scaffolding and doing the drop attack on the dragon feels very cool for like visually, like a God of War cutscene might feel cool.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like something that would have been a cutscene anywhere else. Yeah.
In a worse game, but it's still like I'm not doing very much. Like it just didn't engage me, very well. And like that's not true of the Nameless King. The Nameless King, like you have to play very well to beat him. But this part where it's like, oh, this looks really neat, but I don't think what I'm actually doing here is very cool. It's kind of interesting. You literally get his head, like you get the dragon headstone, the shimmering one or shining one, twinkling,
twinkling,
dragon headstone after you.
No, it's just the plain one actually.
Is it?
Oh, okay.
Oh, you get the twinkling one from what's his name, Hawkwood. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, and it's the regular torso you get from the
Dragonkin's corpse on the yoga mats.
Yes,
absolutely. Thank you. But you literally get a head from cutting off his head, which I kind of like. But mechanically, it didn't like. It was a real big letdown. Like I was like, oh, that's the boss.
No, and like so, the main arena here is like right on a like a crossroads kind of thing too. Like one of which is a dead end. You go down there, get the steel stone plate ring. Gonna die there probably if you don't work your way around him. And there are a couple of kind of like little blind alleys or diverticula on the way up to like the main place. I eventually figured out where I was supposed to run, but it's impossible for me to resist the urge to Monday morning quarterback this. insofar as I wish that there was something motivating me along the lines. The arc for this that would have really satisfied me is being chased and being at a disadvantage until it literally corners me into a situation where all I can do is make the death blow. Like that would be
getting chased by it.
Yeah. And so figuring it out, and also the fact that it takes him down in one hit as opposed to like substantially weakening him. It really is something that feels like it should be. It has all of the all of the pomp and circumstance of this huge triumphal battle. Like, oh, I killed the dragon in one shot, but like that is so not what my reward sensors or synapses are kind of like looking for at this point with this series.
I really liked it the first time around. And every time since then, it's just been kind of a chore. Like, oh no, I got to run through it. And in the lead up to today, I wanted to try doing it a couple of different times. Like I mentioned, I tried doing it with melee, and then what I did was I just used put myself into red tier zone mode, put on the hawk ring, and then just killed it with the bow from above the platform where you're supposed to do the plunging attack. But yeah, there's really not a whole lot of reason to not run through it and then just go back to the previous bonfire and then loot the entire place after you've killed the boss. I really liked it at first, but I think it just comes down to you can't really do a gimmick boss in a way that's fun after the first 3 or 4 times doing it, at least in my view.
I managed to still, I mean, this is, again, I'm going to stop apologizing for sounding like a parody of myself and just live my best truth. I still find Executioner's Chariot really fun.
Oh, yeah.
I like that. I think that boss is tense and cool, like every time I do it.
Once
to my mind, that is the most
dodge
most
the wheels.
Yeah. Like rolling through the wheels is really satisfying. Like I'm always, by the time I get to it, I'm always barely kind of making it. You know, like my stats are just balanced. So the way you can do these kind of easy fights, because the fight against the actual chariot is not that hard, is just to make there be a sense of danger. But I've never felt in danger during this boss fight. I've actually had one of the biggest the biggest anticlimaxes. I don't know if you've done this before. My second time through, I missed the drop attack. He reared up.
Yep, that happened to me
and
twice
then
today.
You just run through the thing. It's so stupid. It's so anticlimactic.
It happened to me 4 times today.
Yep, happens twice to me.
4 times.
Yeah, it's like you have to attack much sooner than you would think.
What a letdown! Like
it is so frustrating. Like if he's in like a particular spot in his animation, but I don't know what that spot is. You just sort of fall right through.
Yeah,
you click through him. It looks so bad. Like it's just like ugh.
And think about how fraught this is too, because you probably did that because there were messages saying, "Hey, try plunging attack, try dropping, try etc. etc." Are people just fucking with me? So I guess that's not the way that you do it. Like maybe this is the path that you take if you want to do range attack. But I guess I'm going to just have to fucking fight this thing from the ground now, all because of an animation glitch.
Yeah, you think that you can't. Yeah, the people are just like, this was only my first time. It worked fine. The second time, actually, this happened. So I knew that I could do it. It just meant I had to and imagine this isn't an RP server, but imagine your character just being like, well, gotta run through that area again. Like it's so the opposite of the moment of triumph it's trying to get you to do. And it's a glitch. There are technical things where you kind of will clip through the guy. I'm generally pretty forgiving of glitches. It's just showing that this very triumphant moment that they're trying to give you is really held together with string cheese and aluminum foil. It is barely holding together as a thing. And then that teleport, which is in any other game, this would be my least favorite teleport that happens in the game. It's just because for, just this, I'm sure you guys both have this impulse where it's oh, I guess I have to trek back down there and just run through it again to get my treasure. Why that teleport? Who's, the previous teleport, which I don't like, we talked about that a lot. At the very least, there's somebody who's doing that, right?
There's someone, sorry, Gary, there's someone doing this one as well. The Serpent Summoner.
Oh, I guess that's probably true.
As soon as the loading screen ends, you hear the sound of the bell, and then we sort of rise up.
But they also that's when they summon someone else though, because when I come in, there's always a summon. So I thought that bell was them summoning.
Well, there are 2 different bells. So the one bell when you are summoned there, and then the second bell doesn't ring until you actually enter the mausoleum.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, good catch. I didn't catch that. Why? It's kind of weird that the Serpent Summoner would bring you here. like I guess that does make. I mean, that definitely answers the question as far as like what's happening. Kind
like
of
if you're looking at it from the trials perspective, that this place is just a series of trials to see if you're worthy of walking the path of the dragon, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
pitting you against other people. Like one of them is explicitly a Drake Blood Knight that they bring in, you know.
It's just kind of from a perspective of like, I'm going to want to go get all those treasures I missed because I, you know, had a sense of tension that, you know, maybe was not actually presented to me. Like, I'm going to run through here, even though I could slowly, methodically clear this because the dragon will just wait forever. I actually didn't do that. I ran through it like my life depended on it, even though it didn't. Now I have to backtrack to like go get the shiny treasures and stuff.
Or use the elevator to go back down to the first floor from the mausoleum. Yeah.
Well, the first floor puts you way back at the very beginning of the area. Like it's way easier just to teleport back to the second bonfire. Yeah. Even because that elevator does almost nothing.
I mean, like puts you right around the corner from the bonfire. Like, yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't, you can teleport through the bonfire or take the elevator.
Yep.
You have an option for some reason, which makes you think that elevator is a holdover from perhaps, you know, prior to teleporting bonfires.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that, you know, maybe if this was a Dreamlands area, maybe you weren't supposed to be able to teleport in bonfires here. You know, like maybe you could throughout the whole game, but this was supposed to be a separate, like the Painted World, like you're trapped here until you finish it.
Yeah.
I think it's probably, at least in my opinion, more likely a vestige of when I think Vati mentioned in the episode on the Untended Graves, the pre-release bonfire mechanic. I think you guys mentioned it at the beginning of the season as well.
Yeah.
That we were supposed to be able to create our own bonfires. And, you know, the mechanics of how that would work, I'm not really sure, but presumably we would get a coiled sword similar to how we got one for defeating Udex Gundr at the beginning of the game. And then presumably we'd be able to, you know, just sort of plant it anywhere we want. So the image I have in my mind is, you know, maybe the best place to create a bonfire is right by the elevator. So in that way, you know, you fight the boss. And then, you know, if you're teleported back up here, you find the elevator, you go, yes, that's right by where I put the bonfire. So, and I think that is just more generally in the game, the source of a lot of the issues with, you know, a lot of people have a problem with how the bonfires are laid out. And it seems to me that, you know, at some point late in development, they decided for whatever reason, this just isn't working. So what they did was they combined the approaches from several different games. So there's the Bloodborne / Demon Souls mechanic, which was never in a Dark Souls game previously, of this boss is dead, you get a bonfire, or you get a checkpoint. And then there's the, which actually doesn't apply in this area, which is interesting. There's the Chalice Dungeon system of, you know, when you warp there, the beginning of a new area, you have a Chamber of a Seal, a guaranteed lamp or bonfire. And then there was just this, so they sort of just mashed all of these different approaches together in a way that doesn't really work as an alternative to having this mechanic that they thought was a great idea, but for whatever reason, whether it be time or just, you know, it was too glitchy, they couldn't figure out how to make it balance properly, that they took it out. And I think that elevator is basically the embodiment of the issues that arise out of that, because it's more or less pointless.
Yeah, I would buy that. I think you're probably right. And there, I mean, it's not the first one that we've seen. Like we've run into several like elevators or shortcuts that, like, you know, it always feels good to get a shortcut. There is a Pavlovian like, oh yeah, shortcut, you know, no matter what, regardless of how actually useful it is. And there's definitely kind of a dearth of like very useful shortcuts in Dark Souls 3. Even though, like, you know, the level design is really great, like it's very dense and does a lot of the things I really like in level design, the kind of shortcut factor, other than a couple levels, is not
Cathedral
perfect.
of the Deep and the
Settlement.
Grand Archives are two like excellent examples of shortcuts being used well.
Yeah, those felt like almost that they were designed specifically around that idea, more so than anything else.
And probably designed by a different team as well, which is interesting.
That's the thing, is like, because of what we know about, I mean, whenever a Souls game comes out, I want that DesignWorks book just for that interview where they talk about kind of what made it. But what little, you know, I've been able to find about this being made by like distinctly separate teams really makes sense, you know. Like, oh, that's why Demon Ruins, you know, like that's like put the C team on it, like, yeah. So you were going to say something a while back, Kole. I feel like I interrupted you. I apologize.
Oh yeah, so I've got just one thing. We were talking about the gimmick bosses. I just wanted to make sure that I threw in my hat on that one. A gimmick boss I think that was done really well is Ceaseless Discharge. Actually, even though I know the trick, one always stays pretty tense. That's kind of the only Dark Souls 1 reference we've made so far in this. I wanted to make sure we were equal opportunity. So
yeah, it's also
one
where
less
you can
of a gimmick boss though than.
It is a regular boss that has a gimmick that even the knowing it doesn't take any of the punch out of the fight. It just gives it a much more pointed goal.
Yeah,
and adds a lot of emotional resonance as well, I think.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's up there with one of my all-time favorite like Dark Souls 1 moments is stumbling across that. Because that's something I managed to not have spoiled for me, and just like naturally ran to find a better place to fight him. Got to the wall, thought, "Oh fuck," and then turned around to find my boss like hanging, for dear life and having the tables turned. Was an amazing moment.
I
so
felt
it's
really
something like Dark Souls. The series is kind of like 1 for 2 for gimmick bosses. Like they're not all. They can't all be as shitty as Bed of Chaos, but there's a few of them that are good. But people kind of generally don't like them. I don't think they're all failures. So I'm glad that you brought that one up for sure. So we talked about getting teleported here. I think you're right, Callum, that we do get teleported by the summoner, which is interesting because if she's not summoning people, like if those aren't like phantoms or something like that, those are actually characters she's summoning in. If she can bodily pull you from an area, what does that mean because then we can definitely have 2 Havels hanging out. Like, because she can, I think 10% of the time she summons, 90% of the time she summons a Drakeblood Knight. These guys are the guys who were kind of obsessed with sin, worshiping the blood of dragons, who hung out down in what's that area?
Shulva, Sunken City.
Shulva, yeah. But 10% of the time she summons Havel, or someone dressed up as Havel. There's another person dressed up as Havel as well here, and they can both exist. Like, she's not summoning the Havel from up on the roof.
She does appear to be, in the sense that if you kill that Havel and you haven't killed the Phantom Havel will no longer spawn.
Yeah, but you can Phantom Havel can be hanging out down here. You can run away from him and then go see second Havel.
Oh gosh,
upstairs.
That's like Night Slayer Sorig.
Yeah,
you can make him fight himself in the Demon Ruins, and he sucks at fighting himself.
It'd be amazing if you could. I've never tested the leash, but I wonder if you can bring summoned Havel up to fight Havel Prime upstairs and like just
that is a great
dueling
idea.
Havels.
What happens when an immovable object fights an immovable object?
Yeah, exactly.
They would probably, my guess would probably that they'd be coded as allies and not as enemies.
Yeah. But if you could rapport those fuckers, though, that'd be awesome.
That's a great idea. I might actually test that. Still.
Gosh! Oh man! Invade somebody and then just use a Sea of the Tree of Giants to
sure.
Two of them.
Just like double Havels, and then you dress up as Havel, and then all 3 of you guys
triple Havel action. Yeah,
Havel it up. I'm way into that. So the summoner, as we mentioned, she's summoning Drakeblood Knights. She's summoning Havels. I understand this Drakeblood Knight place is a place where people farm for XP, farm for souls.
It's I find it really easy to kick them off ledges here.
Yeah. And they're very susceptible to backstabs. The Drakeblood Knights fight very defensively, like they use their shield an awful lot. Havel fights like Havel.
Stamina, pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys ever get a Ricard here, or is Ricard specifically in the next one?
I'm pretty sure he's specific to the next one.
Yeah, he's exclusive.
In the same way that
Havel
Havel is to this
one. Okay. Yeah. I really like the design on these summoners, though. Just the fact that they are not like hiding out. They're just kind of like, hey, look at me, I'm wearing this colorful clothing. Like they cut they almost look like the serpentine kind of equivalents of the evangelists a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Good fights, good design. I like this mausoleum too. Like the amount of like visual clutter around here actually kind of works for me with like the different people, the bodies that are kind of desiccated in their meditation poses. The vessels that are around here, the sensors look really cool, and also, hey, a gigantic dragon, a gigantic petrified dragon in the middle of this room.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
like this area looks really, really neat. All the incense, like sensors and the like this is the detail here looks really lived in and of a place in a way that video game levels don't always look. This is so cool, and the clutter makes sense to me.
Yep.
Here, as a place where like people, possibly meditated until they starved to death. If that's what happened to some of these statues and corpses here.
Can we talk about the summoner for a second? I have a few observations. I don't know if it actually any of this stuff means anything. Once again, sort of the phrase of the episode for me. But it has like a staff that I believe we can get. I can't remember what it's called, but the staff actually doubles as the bell. Right. So when you see them actually ringing the bell, they sort of shake the staff. And they also have sort of a mobility device that and when you get to a certain distance, and they also have a whip as well, but when you're a certain distance away from them, they sort of use their staff to drag themselves towards you. And the other strange thing that I just in thinking back to the variety of the Serpent Men in Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1, there was just the Serpent Man with the great sword, and then there were the Serpent casters that casted lightning specifically. But the Serpent Men summoners actually have sort of a Pursuer's spell. But instead of it being black with sort of a dark light bluish outline, it's black with a yellow outline. So again, I don't know if that means anything, but it's curious that in Dark Souls 1 they would have been using lightning, which is said throughout this game to sort of be and going back to the intro for Dark Souls 1 was the way to kill the everlasting dragons. And then in this game they're not using lightning, which is what leads me to believe that they're sort of serving the dragons as opposed to trying to become dragons themselves. But again, I don't really know.
Yeah, the weapon that they can get, this mendicant staff, which apparently it's not supposed to be a bell on it. So it's a staff with a small bowl attached to the tip, similar to a mendicant's crook. Absorb additional souls from fallen foes. The staff's history is unclear. It may be a relic of an ancient serpent's greed or a ritual artifact used to summon souls.
So does that mean that the summoner is kind of like a Fight Club host who's wearing wearing all this the more souls earned gear? Just
it's there's actually a line here that says also known as damn no HTML. So I think it is supposed to be a Fight Club host.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you know that guy. But it is it's interesting too. This is a weird kind of example or not turning point, but an example in the language of the item descriptions, because we've used that before to be as kind of as close to objective truth as we can get. But it's really not. If this is the staff's history is unclear, it may be a relic of an ancient serpent's greed or a ritual artifact used to summon souls. We see one of those in action. Like it is, and it actually does function. You get more souls if you use it as an item, but it does, like, we literally know that it is a ritual artifact used to summon souls. Like, that's what the enemy uses it for.
Yeah.
That kind of uncertainty in the phrasing there is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why it's calling doubt onto something that is easily observable, honestly, unless it's trying to have some kind of dramatic irony where it's like, oh, some say legend holds that the one who holds this can do so and so, like, and then you see it like, yes, but you don't get this item until after you kill the thing that did the thing. It's kind of strange, and it's a little bit off-putting to me, specifically because it is so vague without having any kind of payoff on the side of it. Like, it's not connecting to something where this fills in a missing piece somewhere else, and it's definitely not doing something like we saw in previous entries where, like, if they wanted to kind of shuck and jive with it, they could have like put in a joke with this or said something kind of cheeky with it, but they didn't do that.
Yeah, it's got a tone that is not usual,
right,
for those things. I feel like the dragon in the middle of this, the kind of petrified dragon. If you do the Path of the Dragon gesture in front of it, like the two statues are, you get the Calamity Ring, which we remember from Dark Souls 1 as the ring you get from Calamite, that makes you take additional damage It is just a challenge mode ring. And this is the item description that explicitly calls out this order of Dragon Knights as like an ancient warriors here, where it says, it kind of feels like it's one of those things where it feels like an item description or a person is talking to players of the game as well. It happens all the time in the DLC, where it's like, this is an additional challenge for some people who find this to be a holy quest or something like that.
Yes, like this is like some people find this to be their purpose.
Yes. So it's a subtweet to Lobos Jr. like in the description form.
I was literally about to bring up Lobos Jr. That was the first person that popped in my mind. But it's also worth mentioning, perhaps in light of the DLC, that it doesn't describe Calamite as the Abyss Dragon. The Abyss Dragon mentioned in one of the DLC item descriptions appears to be a different dragon.
Yeah.
Because that was the first thought that popped into my mind when I picked up that item in the DLC was, Abyss Dragon. Is that referring to Calamite? But no, it just calls him a Calamitous Dragon.
Yeah. So and a Calamitous Dragon seems to have a more direct connection to Calamite to me. I mean, it could be referring to both, but that just frustrates me because then it ties the Axiolans from the DLC to the Archdragon Peak somehow. And like, no,
too many connections.
Fucking stop it. So I prefer to think of this as Calamite. The Abyss Dragon is a cool new thing we're going to fight at the end of. That's going to be the optional boss for the second DLC. I hope.
I'm down.
Yeah, I will fight an Abyssal Dragon.
When going through the boss room and finding the, I think it's the Ring of Steel protection that's in the boss room.
Yep.
And it's like Night King Rendell. I'm like, no, like that's no, there's no need to bring him into that because then it almost like implies sort of that the area we're in is sort of Sen's statue storage emporium or whatever. And I'm just like, no, that's too many connections.
An alternate theory for the Nameless King is that they are also Sen.
Yeah, it's not even alternate. Like it could still be Sen.
Yep.
Like it's pretty contained. Like I don't know at this point.
Yeah.
I guess. Like I don't feel too strongly about that one way or another.
There's nothing in the rules that says it couldn't be Sen. Yeah.
That's true. You couldn't be yeah. Do we have anything else to say about this area before we head on out?
Not in particular. I think that this is it's an instance of visual clutter done well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too, which is not always my favorite thing, but this actually really works for me. There's one little bit of foreshadowing here too, where there's a gate, locked gate, and we can get the item on the other side of it, which is the Dragon Slayer Spear, which was Ornstein's spear, which is our first kind of hint that Ornstein is going to be at play here and kind of what's going on.
Do you think we're supposed to be able to get it through the fence?
I'm
not sure that we are, but it's there.
Hasn't been fixed.
It's kind of, it hasn't been patched out, and I kind of like it as a foreshadowing thing. It didn't play this way for me, but I can imagine a sequencing of this area that is like, oh shit, like what is going on? Like, if I was less jaded by the time I got here, being, for the people who are just like, yes, close every single loop, I want to know what happened to every character from Dark Souls 1, like probably is delighted by finding that and being like, oh, I'm going to find out what happened to Ornstein.
We know what happened to Ornstein.
Like
the game doesn't want you to know about.
Yeah. It is. It didn't work for me, but I kind of like it as a foreshadowing thing. What were we going to say, Callum?
Oh, just by way of a counterexample, there are several untextured parts of the geography in this area that still haven't been fixed. So.
Yeah, that's totally true. There's that huge pile of just like spuzum out in the very ancient beginning of it, where there's like all those rocks, and there's just that big pile of cream. Like it looks like someone spilled a bunch of like vanilla pudding in the middle of Archdragon Peak.
There's a really funny note next to those rocks when I was going through the area again. It says, "Could this be a slip up?" It reminded me of in Farron Keep in the swamp area. There's that one wall that's an illusory wall, but it really isn't. And I left the message that said, "Illusory wall ahead, but visions of bug." I think my highest rated message.
It reminds me because there's with those textures and stuff, because it's one of those things where when people kind of feel like it is very fun to talk about everything that's in these games as if no mistakes are possible. So like we run into things, I can't remember which video it is. One of them made a really big deal about the reflection in the water in Champion Gundir's arena and the skybox it reflected. And I'm like, yes, that could mean something about the cosmology of where Untended Graves is. That could also just be, you know, we know they take place in the same place kind of geographically. That could just literally be a bit of code that was reused for this area like everything else was used. You know, like
also in terms of the games, like the Untended Graves Firelink and our Firelink are basically coded the same. So like if you don't pick up the Silver Serpent Ring your first time at Firelink, and then you go to the Untended Graves, it's the same ring that's there.
Yeah, you can pick it up anytime it's there. So like,
and you're never even meant to get to that spot. So it could just, you know, it's more likely than not just a coding shortcut, really.
Exactly. So when people will do these kind of like big long lore theories that are predicated on ideas like that without allowing for the possibility that it's just like a coding error, you know, and it's like, oh, like there's the big pile of vanilla ice cream in like the middle of Archdragon Peak. There's like a pool in Lothric Castle where you fall down to a shortcut, and there's like a perfectly rectangular like untextured like shiny spot that looks like you're playing in like a homemade Tony Hawk level. It's like, or like a, you know, build a park Tony Hawk level. And it's just like, so it doesn't, again, I give a lot of glitches don't bother me that much. Like video games my immersion, like video games are hard. Like I don't blame From for this. I just think that like when you have to allow for a mistake when you're kind of doing your conjecturing, you know, some of these things can be mistakes. You know, I haven't read a lore theory that has to do with that untextured spot. Like maybe it's, you know, the PC's mind not filling in the gaps of like, you know, of their projection, but yeah, I don't know.
Just briefly, sorry, because I got us on a tangent there, but just one more thing before we move on, and that is in terms of foreshadowing. Before we enter the boss room for the Ancient Wyvern, we also find the Lightning Clutch ring, which mentions that the Archdragon Peak. I can't recall exactly how it was worded, but it essentially mentions that it acts as a lure for crestfallen warriors. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that was a little neat piece of foreshadowing there.
Absolutely, like it's foreshadowing ludically because it's like, hey, put on this ring, idiot. You're gonna find a lot of lightning, and then two, just as like who we're gonna run into here. So that's really cool. That's like a good catch.
Yeah.
We head out back from the mausoleum. And we're introduced to these rock lizard enemies, which I love these guys.
They're super cute. Yeah,
they are super cute.
I plug his videos a lot. Callum, do you know Zoe Koikum?
I have not heard the name. No.
He's
the things you didn't know or whatever. Yes.
Yeah.
I've never heard the name actually spoken, so
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right either. I think that, you know, I'm fairly certain like English is not his first language. He never talks in his videos, but like for a while there was a glut of like the things you didn't notice videos, and I would watch them. I'd be like, oh, I know all this stuff because I do this for a living. And then, but he like legitimately finds stuff nobody else is finding like pretty regularly. A lot of them are weird glitches. But he finds things like, I didn't know that you could kick these guys and turn them into like little roly-poly bugs. And it's the cutest thing in the world, and it's the best strategy to deal with them.
Yep. I discovered that for the first time, again, while preparing for this episode. The only caveat is that if you can't perfectly execute one kick after another, then you quickly get in trouble.
Yep.
But it's adorable how they roll backwards twice, and it's just like, oh, it's so cute.
What's amazing about these guys, I love the way that they're laid out because they're almost always set up to kind of like catch you in the crossfire. So they show you the one right away, but there's another one that comes off from the side. And then right beyond that, there's 3, and then there's 4. And they're pretty much always set. Like, you can underestimate them because of their cuteness and because of the goofy way in which they move around. The way they, correct me if I'm wrong, they breathe fire, right?
Yeah.
They're basically the dinosaurs from Chocolate Island in Super Mario World.
Oh sure, like not the Resners, but the like little miniature Resners.
Right, yeah. But no, like if you underestimate them and if you just try and run past them, I died a couple times today, like getting caught in the intersection of these guys as they were kind of bone wheeling me.
Yeah, they really are. Like, because the bone wheels in this game are pretty much, and same with Dark Souls 2, nothing compared to the Dark Souls 1 bone wheels. These guys are the true bone wheels of Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a DLC where it's all bone wheels, the Sonic the Hedgehogs from Ilium Lois. And then these guys and just Convoy.
It'll be a crossover with that indie game Rollers of the Realm.
Yeah. No. I like these guys a lot, and they're also cute, and I would like a plush of them. And Dark Souls, rather than doing all your merchandise and making shirts that no one would ever wear in a million years, give me some plush. Like, give me a plush Mimic, give me a plush one of these things, give me a plush Crystal Lizard. Like, I will give you all of my money for that shit. Like, lean into the cute, not into the like. People say I'm gaming too much, but they just need to Dark Souls here. Get good.
They just need to Dark Souls here.
Like, the shirts have to end.
I do think it's interesting how they've sort of, because these guys seem to be crystal lizards, right?
Yeah. I was thinking that too. The resemblance is like definitely intentional.
And so it's just interesting that, like, in Dark Souls 1 there were just the crystal lizards. In Dark Souls 2 they had the blue ones and the red ones that were the troll ones that exploded once you got close to them, which were basically kind of pointless, because as soon as you knew that the red ones were no good, because obviously they're colored red, then you just avoid them from then on. But I like how they really expanded, like the ones that give you the dragon, or the what do you call it, the Titanite scales, that they're said to be crystal lizards who feasted on souls, and I don't know if there's an equivalent explanation for these ones, but I thought it was kind of cool that they would develop this crystal lizard in these different directions.
Yeah, it also should be noted kind of as a general thing, and this is what this area has in common with the dragon area, is that this is where you go to get tons and tons of Titanite.
Oh yeah.
This is Chunk City, and not the Chunk City that I have an account for online, right? Like, it's all number one chunk girls 24/7. But this is like Titanite Town, USA. Like,
you will pick up stacks of 3 twinkling Titanite. Like, it is crazy.
Yeah,
as well as the means to buy basically infinite upgrade materials.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Like, this is where you can start making whatever weapon you want. And like, that kind of plays into that. On one hand, it's like, it's so late in the game that, for PvE, it's not very useful. For an area that is the PvE extension of a PvP kind of concept, it makes total sense. Like, hey, you've proven yourself as a warrior. Now you can make whatever build you want. Go do a bunch of PvP. Like, go do a bunch of fight clubs because you're a dragon now. Like, in the literal sense that you can turn into one, but also in kind of the gameplay sense, like, you are a warrior. Like, when I kind of put that together, it really works for me as an area that like loads you up on that stuff. So you get attacked by another wyvern on this path that is just full of these little rock cuties. And
I'm gonna call them that for now on, rock cuties. I like that.
It's a gauntlet. Like, these cuties don't fuck around, man. they will. This is a really, really hard little run up. I fought the lizard once because I try to kill everything at least once in Dark Souls. But most times I'm running through this, I just run through, and it's a hard run.
Yeah, because I don't know what they're weak to, but they take a lot of hits. They really are damage sponges, at least anytime I've ever fought them. So yeah, I just try to kick them off the edge more often than not. Yeah.
Well, and the ancient wyvern pops up, to like, you can't fight.
It's
fight
really a devious. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's
because they know that you'll start to run too, and then you run and you're basically face to face with another ancient wyvern, and it's like, oh shit, FromSoft, come on.
Yep. Yeah. And running away from this, the ancient wyvern is going to be how you get into those crazy intersections of the rock cuties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a little room up at the top of here. This is where, and I'm already running, so it's like I don't want to stop and fight because I'm being chased by rock cuties. So like, there's this like little like this area I've run through mostly, but when you stop here, it's pretty interesting because this is where there's another serpent summoner, and this person summons a naked fencer who has Ricard's weapons and stuff. Ricard, another Sen's Fortress connection.
Yep.
If this is indeed Sen's Fortress related, but our Ricard wore clothes. I can't think of a reason why this person would be naked unless he's trying to turn into a dragon, which is not.
Oh no, it's another Logan thing.
Yeah, exactly. He's naked for dragon reasons, some way, shape, or form. But that's a weird thing for Ricard to be doing, because like my understanding of like the reason why Sen's Fortress kind of made sense before is we had like warriors from all over the land coming to Sen's Fortress, but Sen's Fortress was positioned specifically as the testing grounds before Anne Orlando. So it was to get to, it wasn't a goal in and of itself. It was a stumbling block on the way to a goal that was not proving yourself as a warrior, that was not had anything to do with dragons. It was getting to the city of the gods, So like it made sense for everyone to kind of be going to Sen's Fortress and getting trapped there and dying, or getting, barely making it in the case of what's his head, Tarkus. But this is a little bit weirder to me, like that he's here. It feels like if this is Sen's Fortress relation, like I wonder what's going on.
He also doesn't appear to be fully naked. I think he's wearing Cornyx's wraps, so that like the gauntlets are Cornyx's, and he also seems to be wearing Volnar's crown.
Yeah, he's wearing a crown, which lends to him being Prince Rykert, because princes wear crowns.
Yeah,
even if
so I was wondering,
crown,
like,
which is like, man, why?
Is it that they were just like, hey, we need a crown so that it's more obvious that this is Prince Rykert, or are we supposed to draw some sort of connection to Volnar?
It's the connection to Volnar, I think, is beyond the pale. Like I will not entertain that as a possibility. It's also possible that this is a joke, like the fact that a naked fencer comes in and tries to, stab you and stuff, because like the nudity, it's kind of an easy joke, but so the summoners, they summon souls. It's not explicitly like spirits or something like that. Presumably those Drakeblood Knights are also trying to become dragons. If Rykert is naked because he's trying to become a dragon, Havel would be, well, maybe not Havel, because like we wouldn't recognize him as such, but the Drakeblood Knights could arguably be nude as well. This could also just be a goofy joke. Like it's not a very jokey area, but like
it's like a Manny or Mildred type thing.
Totally, exactly. Like when this first happened to me, I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like this is all right. I'll fight a naked fencer, in the middle of Dragon Town after like these little like pill bugs like chase me up a dragon stairway. Like it's just
I kept running until I got to the bonfire. I was like, screw you, Rykert. I'll come back. I need to go find a bonfire. I'll be back.
It's I don't really know what it means that this is Rykert here, other than like, again, just kind of connections.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, that weapon art on that fucking art, or the art too, on Rickert's rapier, whatever it is. Yeah. Oh gosh, that got me. I died to it because I forgot that you could just fire that off and kill you instantly. Yeah.
He knocked me off the edge first time I fought him.
Oh no.
Yeah. I was trying to be cute and hit him off the edge, but no, I agree, Gary. I don't know what to think about this. So if there is something that, and I thought a lot about this over the course of the last week, like the whole area in general, but this was the one thing where I was just kind of like, I don't know.
Here, Kole, I'm going to save us a bunch of emails too.
Okay.
Ricard is the actually the name of the blacksmith, the magic blacksmith. Ricard is who we're talking about. Ricard Drapier.
Thank you. So Rykert or Rykard. Yeah. Rykert.
Yeah, with a D. Well, because Rykert is a person. So it's definitely not
Rykert
with a D.
of Vinheim, I think.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, Ricard is what we meant. So people who are like, delete that email that you were sending, because it is, we caught it.
Also, what
I
you
also
meant.
get a lot of comments on my stuff from people very angry about my failed pronunciation of made up names. And so I feel your pain there. That, and when you guys got shit for asking people to use punctuation in their responses,
sure.
I had to do the exact same thing, because it's really hard once you do your day job stuff and then you record like a 2-hour episode or podcast, and then you have to read a bunch of comments with no punctuation. It's like,
And some guy said he like quit listening to the show based on me asking people to use commas in their sentences, and it's like, wow, is that your hill to die on? Like, and then when I said that, like, hey, why that's why is this your hill to die on? They're like, why is it your hill to die on? It's like, who's dying? Like, I'm just asking you guys for like
it's just
I'm not quitting the podcast over it. Like it
and
is
also
just
like a kind of a useful skill to live in the world, being able to communicate your ideas effectively with little room for ambiguity.
Like, I mean, that's one I'm with you on that. I wasn't even saying that though. Like, I understand if people are saying like, oh, you're being, prescriptive to people. I just mean if you want me to read it out loud, like, if I'm going to read this out loud, please do this. This is what I ask. It's not I wasn't trying to say like, this is the way you should live your life. Just, I mean, that's long water under the bridge. So, but it is that kind of thing.
For opening up old wounds by that.
No, it's okay. The people got really mad. The Eldritch thing, people also got really mad about, and it's like they sound very similar. And sorry.
And you knew what we meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but you knew what we meant.
Yeah. So Ricard, I'm not sure if this is actually Ricard. I'm ultimately not sure if it actually matters.
Yeah.
I think it is an Easter egg joke more likely than anything else.
Yeah.
The guide isn't very helpful here either. It just refers to him interchangeably as unkindled, but it refers to basically every NPC that is like a player character as unkindled. And it also refers to him as a champion, a summoned champion, but that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so it is a champion that the snake summoner summoned. It's a fun encounter. I like the separation between you and the snake summoner up there. Like if she's able to get off her soul mass or whatever the miracle equivalent of that is, that is also incredibly difficult. Like it's a nice little scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. The kind of, once you know it's coming, the trick is just if you want to fight him and get the weapon, is just while Ricard is being summoned, just immediately run up and kill the serpent priestess. Because he's got kind of a period before he can get down to business. So we run past this, we go into this little area with a bonfire here. This is where the boss is. We can go to this bell, but we're going to ignore it for now, and do the Hawkwood stuff real quick before we actually get to the belfry.
Yes. So yeah, this will be beyond this area. This bonfire is going to be very useful because we're going to be headed to this gauntlet that we mentioned before. Kind of heading up to this peak that kind of overlooks a little bit of the entire area. It's a big mix of both the caster serpent men and the regular melee ones, and also the gigantic guys as well, and
some rocket suits.
Yes, the gauntlet. Because I think the only two casters are the summoners, the two summoners.
All right. Yeah.
Sorry.
No. That's I recall, like, as I got a little bit further away, some of them were doing their little spit fireballs thing at me.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, they also have. Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. Go on.
No. I mean, I guess all this is to say that, like, if you're going to go up there, you either have to be really smart about the way that you run if you're going to try and get past them. Otherwise, you are going to have to take all of them out in a go, because they will come piling up behind you in a big bad way.
If Kole had said ranged attackers, I think that would have done that. Yeah. So this is really hard. You can summon help here. You can get Hawkwood for it. Hawkwood, what triggers it? Is it getting what triggers him to leave?
Yeah, so if you've been following Hawkwood's quest line, which is more or less just talking to him at Firelink after passing various quest markers throughout the game, he will eventually leave Firelink. And if he does, then you'll find his summon sign right by the Great Belfry bonfire. And what's really interesting... Pardon me?
Or is it in front of the gauntlet that we're
yes, in front of the gauntlet, so just down the stairs from the bonfire. But what's really interesting about that is that in my blind playthrough, I rang the bell, and then I tried to summon him, and he black crystalled out right away.
Yep. And that puts a moratorium on any other summons, actually.
Yes. Yep. You can't summon him again after that, because he's not there to help you defeat the boss. He doesn't give a crap. He doesn't give a shit about helping you defeat the Nameless King. I think rather than him being there to help us walk the path of the dragon, he's there to basically help himself.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. It goes back to something that you said, Gary, in the episode of The Untended Graves, that NPCs generally don't have a goal or an aim or a purpose of their own. And even more broadly than that, I've never played Demon Souls, but in all the Souls games I've played, and I consider Gilbert to sort of be the the crestfallen character of Bloodborne. But the crestfallen up until now has really never had much going on other than just being crestfallen. And in his case, it's really interesting that if you guys fight through the Path of the Dragon, so this entire area with, all of these large serpent men and small serpent men and the casters and the ones with the 2 daggers, so all of these, there's so many of them. And I like, as an aside, that this entire area is pretty much destructible as well. Mm-hmm. So it creates this really sort of epic moment of you guys fighting up to this peak. And what's interesting about that is that, his leash is much longer than most of the NPCs. Like all the NPCs in the game, and I summon a lot of NPCs just because I have fun messing with their AI. Mm-hmm. And all of the NPCs in Dark Souls 3, I don't know if you guys ever noticed this, but they're all kind of socially awkward. And they'll leash towards you, but then as soon as they get to the point where you stop, they sort of turn around and show their back to you. Like there's some weird stuff with their pathing in this game. And so that's why I noticed that his leash is really, really long. And the reason for that is that, again, he's not actually there to help you. He's there because he sucks in this form and he can't make it to the top himself.
Right.
At least. And that I spent, I think, an hour and a half. I have about an hour and a half of footage of me summoning Hawkwood using a white branch and then just watching him. Like, he can't even get past the first little bit where you go into that sort of, room where there's a whole bunch more of them. He dies usually after killing 1 or 2 or 3 serpent men. And so if you clear out the entire area, you'll go up there. He does the Path of the Dragon gesture in front of the altar that's up there at the the end of the Path of the Dragon, and then he just sort of disappears. And if we do the same thing, so I can't remember which is which. I think that we get the torso stone, and he has the headstone, the twinkling torso stone specifically, and he has the twinkling headstone.
Right.
And so, it took me a really long time to try and figure out why that is beyond just simply, there can only be one. And so it goes back to this thing we were talking about with the yoga mats earlier that it seems almost like people are being granted admittance to the Archdragon Peak in pairs, and that and so this invokes sort of the multiverse aspect of the story, which I don't always like, but in this instance I kind of like it. And it's invoked elsewhere in the game. So another example being Seers of the Sunless Realms, when you allow yourself to be summoned by her in the Pit of Hollows. If you look up, if you've defeated the Cursor of Greatwood in your world, you would have killed Hodrick in your world. You'll find his corpse the first time the ground breaks. Mm-hmm. But when you're summoned by Cirrus into the Pit of Hollows, if you look up, it's not broken. So basically, she hasn't. So the game at several different junctures invokes this sort of multiverse understanding of, or multiverse conception of the game's world. And so through whatever means and for whatever reason, each person that enters Archdragon Peak, if they follow the Path of the Dragons, they can only get either the headstone or the torso stone of the twinkling variety. And what's more, I guess we should also mention that when you get up to the top, when you're at that altar, there's a mountain straight ahead of us that, you see a towering dragon at.
Yeah.
And so presumably that's the dragon to whom you're sort of praying in order to be granted the twinkling stones.
Right. When he makes it up to, so I've never tested this. If he makes it up to that altar first and does the meditation pose, does he get the torso, or does he always just has the head and is waiting for you to get the torso?
It's always
disappears.
The same. Okay.
He disappears. Yeah. And see, this is where I run into trouble, because I'm not sure if these things are supposed to be connected, all these sort of connections that I'm making here, or if it's just a case, and if they are, or if it's just a case of we don't want anyone to miss this quest line. Because no matter what happens, no matter if you summon him or not, if you get one of them, then he winds up with the other one. Mm-hmm. So no matter what happens, if you followed his quest line up to that point, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
But then if we go back to Firelink Shrine and we talk to Andre,
real quick before we move on to that, like what's kind of interesting about him using you for help is that you don't get summoned into his world like you do with Cirrus. Like it seems like if they were signaling that like you're literally every time that you need to help out a bro in this game, like you go into their world to help them out. I'm not saying that you're wrong. It's just kind of interesting, kind of inversion of it. And I think that the reason why that is to flip your expectations with that Nameless King thing. And I think more than him not having interest in it, I think that he does not want to kill the Nameless King and probably does not want you to either. And that is why he black crystals out.
There's that note right next to the lever for the bell, which says, if you wish to walk the path of the ancient dragons, don't ring the bell.
Yeah. And he definitely wants that. That's all he wants. He's a single issue voter.
Yeah.
So, like, so when you, that's the only thing about that. But I think other than that, I think you're pretty right on about, at least, definitely about his motivations. And he explicitly says so when we head back to Firelink, where Andre has a bit of his sword grass that has a note on it. And you're going to run into Andre. You check out, you talk to Andre. You're going to check in with him, and it's kind of an interesting, kind of better version of Cirrus's quest line, where there's kind of an item. It's a little bit obscured in the main merchant. You may or may not use. You're definitely going to go to Andre, especially with all this upgrade material from Archdragon Peak, and you head there, and it says, "Hey, he's waiting for you at the Abyss Watchers Arena," essentially.
It says something about a mausoleum in Farron Keep, but it's the Abyss Watchers boss room. Yeah. And I only remember that because I had to warp to like 15 different bonfires before I figured out. And then I Googled, what is a mausoleum? I didn't know what a mausoleum was. So.
And you go in there and you fight him. And he says, like, I'm going to take this thing from you. I'm going to be the true dragon.
Right.
I'm going to, take the item from you. And then kind of like, he's one of these NPC quest lines. As much as I don't like the NPCs in Dark Souls 3 in general, this one works for me because he's always kind of shit. Like he has this redemptive moment, but he heals more than any NPC that you can fight in the game. Like he will just back off and heal. Like it's like the story of somebody who joined an order of warriors, wasn't good enough for it, tried to join another order of warriors, also wasn't good enough for it, and killed himself. Got killed, and then like eventually you find his stuff by a tombstone. Is that correct? Am I right in that, or am I wrong? I thought you eventually get an item from that, but I could be mistaken about that one.
You find ashes that could be his in Archdragon Peak.
The Dragon Seekers.
Yeah.
Ashes. Yeah. Even though you could find that before this happens too. But they, timey-wiminess, I guess.
Yeah, that would require like a timey-wimey. So I just, the ashes are whoever's. hadn't even really made that connection. But
he dies somehow. He dies either to your hands or. But it is the story of somebody who's just kind of like shit at fighting and only wants to be good at fighting. That's super kind of sad. I don't know.
I mentioned earlier that, like when I first started grad school, I really struggled. And one of the things that I really struggled with is something that's called, which is generally a thing, but it's something that's often discussed in the context of new graduate students, and that is imposter syndrome. That he did some really awesome things. The fact that before we even get to Firelink, he's already wearing, full sort of Abyss Watcher's gear other than the helmet. And he has, the Abyss Watcher's sword and all this other stuff. Like he's done all these great things. But even still, one of the first things he says to us is that, they would have us return the Lords of Cinder to their molding thrones when we're not even fit to lick their boots. So he expresses sort of this vulnerability, this anxiety, this he feels basically throughout the entire game that he's worthless and unkindled in general can't even die right. So we suck. And again, when you summon him at the Path of the Dragon Gauntlet, he does suck. Like, again, I can't stress enough, an hour and a half of me watching him just going, come on, Crest Bro, you can do it. And just getting his butt kicked over and over again, but uses his shield heavily. But when you go to the mausoleum to fight him, the Abyss Watcher's boss room, he's using the proper Abyss Watcher setup. He no longer uses the shield. He's not, and he is way harder, way harder, way more capable than he is when you summon him. And so I think that, even though it's kind of tragic, that is pretty cool. And one of my viewers, a person named Yosaho, often provides very interesting translation notes on like things that are really different. And if you kill him and therefore you become the dragon, presumably he sort of goes hollow. The dialogue in English sounds more just like crestfallen, self-wallowing. But in Japanese, the person basically said that in Japanese, in English his motivation is pretty vague, but in Japanese he has no regrets in losing to you. That it translates loosely to something like, if you were the one who is to become a dragon, that's not bad at all. So I thought that was really, really cool. And again, just the mere fact that he's just more than being simply crestfallen, I think is really awesome.
I like that too, and he definitely improves. I found, and it could be 1,000 different factors like playstyle, build, or anything like that. Found him to be pretty much a pushover in the Fair and Keep arena as well. Mm-hmm. So it was hard. It seemed like a dual failure kind of thing to me. Either way, it really works though. And
either way,
even
he has a new swagger. He's definitely like Stella. He got his groove back.
Yeah, his groove is back. The pool person, regardless of gender, has been swagged, swanked, swaddled.
Yep, swaddled. He swaddled that pool person. Yeah.
Yeah, he took a pool person, made him his own, and he's definitely got his groove back, regardless of whether it is like a story of like, failure versus failure with dignity. Like a cowardly failure versus a good death, like a good kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is told kind of through gameplay stuff, like those little PvP, multiplayer interactions taking place. Like when I read that he black crystals out, because I, did not try to bring him into the boss. My first time I brought him here, I summoned him. He was in way too rough shape, and I was like, I'm going to take this guy into the boss, and he's going to die right away. So I'm going to go get him killed, which is a little bit like more cynical, and then go into it, and you can't summon him after he's gotten the thing. Or he disappears, his summon sign goes away. But just that little bit of him, like all the storytelling being done through mechanics, like what gear he wears, where he decides to fight you, all that stuff is actually pretty great.
Yeah.
We also find a soul of a crestfallen knight right near where we summon him, which is what led me initially to believe that, it's just that he sucks and that he can't walk the path of the dragons himself. And so therefore, even though obviously this wouldn't work, although I've never tested it, but it wouldn't work if another player summoned you and you went and did the path of the dragon. Mm-hmm. Like that would be a really cool thing if that were actually a thing. But yeah, there was something else I wanted to add, but I can't remember. So
it's pretty neat. Like I like this. I like this quite a bit. The way this articulates.
Sorry, we should mention that if he kills you, you respawn with a message on the bottom of the screen that says the champion has taken the dragon.
Dragon. Yeah. You can lose the ability to go full dragon.
And he says
you just have to go kill him to get it back, but you can lose it temporarily for sure.
Mm-hmm. And he says this will be no petty theft. Like he wants to earn it. And so I guess a way of explaining the mechanics of the fact that you can just keep respawning at the bonfire that's right there and keep killing him over and over, or keep trying to kill him over and over again. And he'll never leave. He'll just stay there forever until you kill him, which is kind of, but I thought that was a cool touch.
It's on the more recent playthroughs, on the this last one, on the second one, I just let him kill me and take it. Because I'm not going to turn into a dragon. I'm not going to do the dragon torso thing. Like, let the baby have his bottle. Fuck him. I don't mean that. Like, I just mean like he seems like a good dude. Let him have it. Like, I don't want it. And that's
the
that's
only
a good
possible way to get a happy ending for an NPC, really, in this game. When you think about it, just let him hang out there with his abyss bros with his dragons.
Yeah. Everybody you ever knew and loved is dead. You still have to live with that crushing failure, no matter how much you feel like you redeemed yourself before. And also, you have to live on the corpses of your former compatriots. Have fun. Yeah. Later, dude.
And the sky is slowly weeping.
Right.
And eventually is going to drip into the it's pretty well done. This is a well done NPC quest line in this game, I think, for sure. You can head up to the roof here as well. There's a little area where next to a gigantic dead dragon is our old buddy Havel.
Yep.
or someone dressed as Havel, or who knows. But you can definitely have a couple Havels going on here. I've read things where it kind of suggests this is not Havel. It's like somebody dressed up as Havel or one of his order of knights.
Yeah, I mean that was the case in 2, right? When we found his armor around the Grave of Saints, like it talked about a whole order of knights who took up after him.
Yeah. So who knows who this actually is? I mean, obviously, I think the intended effect for the player is that like, oh shit, Havel.
Yeah.
You know, and he's got this amazing. His shield has a weapon art now, which is incredible, which makes him grow little rock tumors all over, and he's super tough boy.
It's so gross. It's like it's almost as gross as the pus of man.
Yeah,
I saw this and I was initially very happy for him because I'm like, oh, he finally got to kill a dragon.
Yeah.
Because ever since the beginning, that was kind of what he was. I hates dragons and I hates magics, and ne'er the two shall meet. And so like it's actually super imposing.
Who the scaleless?
it's super imposing to like see this dude who already, you know, you have these associations with, like standing over what we have to presume is a fresh kill of this thing that has probably given you a lot of trouble before this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I had the shield, the item description for the shield where describes this. It says the shield is imbued with a special power reminiscent of Havel himself. I don't remember where I read this or who shared this with me, but the idea being that I think in the original Japanese text, it draws a much clearer distinction between Havel, the Rock, Bishop Havel, and the Havel himself is meant to indicate that that's not that this person is Havel, but drawing a distinction between Havel's men, like the army of Havel, and Havel as a person.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more likely, obviously, that this is one of Havel's men, whether contemporary, unlikely, but more likely a descendant of, or a pretender, possibly as well.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. At this point, like this I didn't start thinking of this in storyline terms until after the first time, because this is one of the last areas I did in the game, and I was furious about all the callbacks. So, like, when I got to this point, I was like, well, fuck you. Like, just like, oh, great. The whole gang's here.
I don't think it means anything. I just think it was obligatory at this point, and the little scene they set up, disconnected from everything else, had a little bit going for it.
It's he plays into, like, I've watched a bunch of lore videos kind of on this area and the Nameless King and stuff, and he plays into that kind of theorizing, as to why he would be here, why there would be a Havel Knight. Here, I don't know. I think it is mostly just kind of to like give a nod, I don't think
to make
you
work for a Tight Knight slab as well.
I had a really hard time with him mechanically the first time I got here. I just like, I ended up like throwing a bunch of dung pies at him, like toxicking him. Like I had a really hard time with him.
Yeah,
I managed to get him to fall to his death. He fell down the ladder, and then he tried climbing back up, but he got like caught in the pathing of the rock lizard, and then just sort of tumbled off the cliff. And I'm like, all right, rip, I guess.
Lizard's on my side now.
Now who's the rock?
It's that lizard. I would like to see that little lizard carrying the shield and dragging that club behind him. So if you want to fight the boss of this area, there's nothing to do other than ring that bell. And I didn't for a long time because it said don't. So I was like, oh, there's got to be another thing to do. But nope, this is it. Like, you can go become a dragon and then go do a bunch of fun BVP and RP server stuff, or you can ring the bell and fight the boss. Giving you like one of the coolest cutscenes in the game.
So good.
I think, which is going to play into like, again, my thesis of these bosses where it's like presentation, A+ extra credit, through the roof. Like, this looks really, really neat. As the sky darkens, the wind kicks up, and the bell just doesn't stop ringing. Like, there's some point like, no, sorry, I'm trying to fix it, and like there's no fixing it. It just keeps going. As the sky turns into a different version of a nightmare sky from the other version, in a way that is like so relatable, unlike the black hole sun of the main area. Like, this is like, oh, like I grew up in Tornado Alley. Like, this is a specific kind of storm that we got all the time growing up. Like, scary storm.
Yeah.
Interesting. And that's something that like I had because Toronto, we don't really have, in Toronto, Canada, don't really have any weather like that. But my first, the way I described it here in my notes was that the entire area becomes sort of encircled by a cyclone, and that we're sort of in the eye of the storm. And because if you look, you see it's moving sort of in both directions. But I'm not a meteorologist, so I don't really know. Beyond being able to say that I checked to see if, when we went back to the yoga mats, if you could actually see the skybox in that state. No, it looks exactly the same.
It is very lovingly animated. That tornado comparison is actually super on point, Gary. And also just kind of like the turbulence of the rain. Like, we've never had a storm like this. We just barely had rain in Drang Lake Castle. We have snow, on occasion, but like this kind of, literal atmospheric effect of like letting shit is about to get real is something we haven't seen. And again, tick one off for, or like, let's check the box for another thing that is really benefited by the improved hardware,
Sure.
by knocking this up a generation like this. Like, it looks fantastic. And just even the idea of like taking a leap of faith and stepping out onto this invisible platform. The arena in which you fight this guy is tremendous, I think, specifically because of that. Like, you do feel like you're just at the whim of the elements.
Yeah. A very metal arena for a very metal boss, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That leap of faith is really worth noting, too, because I had no idea I was supposed to go down there. Like, that was another thing that I backtracked through almost all of this level looking to see what was changed.
Yeah.
Like, I thought, maybe like the dragon I fought at the beginning is going to come back and be a real boss fight now. Like, what is this going to be? And then like, I just have to walk on nothing.
Yeah.
You walk on this cloud thing across this little bridge area to go fight the Nameless King.
But not before you kill his buddy, the King of Storms.
1,000 fucking times.
Yeah.
Like,
so there's no explicit cutscene that introduces these two. They just kind of swoop down, and then there they are. You have this gigantic drake, who is the King of Storms, and then this figure that we see riding him with just an incredible mane of hair on him. We've seen statues of him down on the first floor. So like, this is his home. Like, this is a place that is somewhat erected in his honor, and he is pissed off that you are right here, and he is fighting from the back of this dragon. And this is, at this point, again, ticking a lot of the boxes that make Kole say yes, 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 don't stop the rockin'.
Yeah, it's an amazing presentation of fighting. Like, it's very metal. A little bit, like I said before, it leans a little bit into painted on the side of a van, side of metal, as opposed to the kind of weird, creepy metal, that I tend to prefer. But like, it is very cool. And even this first phase of the fight is, you have no way of really knowing that this is just an Estus tax going into it. So like, the first time I was like, this is kind of a cool fight. The camera's kind of shit during it, but like, it's kind of a cool fight. He mostly attacks through he does like a lot of swooping attacks. The dragon, he does a fire breathing attack, which is Yahtzee. It's time to go in and start smacking his head around. It's the only place he does damage. He does the I'm going to fly up in the sky and shoot fire down at the ground like the ancient dragon does, which, God, do I fucking hate that attack in Dark Souls. Like, please stop doing that ever. And this one, like, the window to run away from this is very narrow. Like, you have to start running straight away really fast, like as soon as it starts happening, in order to get out of the radius of that.
What I essentially do during... Sorry, I was just going to say that what I usually do in the first phase is use, if you have the dex for it, just use a bow and just attack the Storm Drake from a distance. And that is, at least for me, the only way I found to do this fight without the camera driving me crazy, the first phase at least. And you can usually, like, with the Black Bull Ferris, 4 or 5 hits, something like that. And then, usually procs for a critical attack, and then you can just go right to the second phase.
Getting to finding this first phase is all about efficiency.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, in a way that, like, is meta in a way that's not, I don't love, where, like, it's not becoming about, like, those kind of, like, desperate calls, kind of close calls and desperate measures and stuff. It is about how do I get through this while maintaining as much of my resources as possible.
Yeah. If I spend more than 3 Estus in this first phase, I might as well just restart.
Myself. Yeah. Because we're going to get to that second phase. So the first phase, there's not too much to it. This boss in my mind would be improved a lot if this first phase didn't respawn. If you could just go directly to the second phase after you do the first one once, I think.
And it would add a lot of pathos too, because when you kill this Drake, he kind of pulls an Ornstein and or Smo and absorbs the soul of it. He runs up and impales its eye. And by reading the item descriptions, this dude, these guys, they've rolled deep. Ever since small times. Yeah. And so you killed his best friend, so now things are real. And if you come back and this thing is gone, that is an incredible game for efficiency, but also it's we still need to settle this.
Yeah, hey, you did this, and you're still going to pay. And he doesn't run up and stab in the eye. He lovingly puts his hand on it.
Yeah,
looks at it for a moment, considers. There's a lot of pathos to it. In a way that really worked for me the first time.
Similar to Ornstein, I think.
Yes.
From Dark Souls 1. Yeah.
So again, it worked on me the first time I saw it. The fact that it happens 1,000 times doesn't help. When you get to the second phase of this, where it becomes what I think is unquestionably the hardest boss in the game pre-DLC, at the very least, where he actually becomes the Nameless King. I'll let you guys. I don't want to influence anybody because I've talked about a lot the season where I really don't like this boss, but I'll hear other options. Where do you guys land on the Nameless King, and then I can kind of articulate why he gets up on my dick in a bad way, why he sounds me in with a fury.
I'll go ahead.
You first, Kole. You first.
Okay, all right. Mine's real simple. I've never beaten him. I don't think that I ever will. I just think that he's a little bit too fast, a little bit too furious, and there's nothing that I can do, be it dodge, be it block, be it try and manage his attacks or try and goad him into a particular pattern to kind of negate the fact that he will just chew through my endurance in a way that no boss outside of Bloodborne ever has. I don't feel like the numbers line up, and I desperately want to like this boss because it combines a lot of elements that I really enjoy, but I just don't think that it's tuned in a way that feels fun for the way that I enjoy playing these games.
Yeah, the balance is certainly a little bit off for particular play styles, and so that's the reason why I started using a bow in the first phase, is that Gary, as you mentioned, I was going into the second phase with anything less than 13 S's, I'm okay, I'm dead. So and I'm in the simultaneously fortunate and unfortunate position to have a lot of people who enjoy watching my blind playthroughs. And so I say fortunate because, it's cool that people actually care to see my reactions, but also unfortunate in that you can't end a playthrough like that without beating all the bosses. And
sure.
That was, I think, episode 28 of, about an hour each episode. And I was just exhausted at that point because, this is something I do on my spare time. I don't, I have a full-time gig pretty much. And this is just something I do for fun. And that was I think I must have died 20, I counted last week, I should have wrote it down, 20, 22 times or something like that. So I had to edit it all together in a way that, was nice, that I didn't actually have to do again until a certain final boss from a certain DLC who just, kicked me all over the place. But no, I agree that it's, maybe a little bit hard. I've defeated the boss several times, but it's always been the hardest boss for me, and the most embarrassing aspect of that is that by the time I actually beat the boss, I was so frustrated by the whole thing that I didn't bother reading any of the item descriptions, and so then I had to deal with 50 comments of people saying, I can't believe you didn't even find out who that was. You didn't even say that was Gwyn. What kind of lore person are you? And I'm I'm sorry. I just, I wanted to end it and go back to my real responsibilities and stuff. But no, I agree. I've defeated the boss several times, but it's never easy, and it's always, I always grind my teeth while doing it. And I know there are some people who can do it soul level 1 with no clothes and using a broken straight sword. But yeah.
I
agree. It's really
the
hard.
fact that somebody can do Lobos exists, therefore somebody can do a thing.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
That is not enough. That dog will not hunt for me in justifying why a thing is the way it is.
Yeah, it doesn't excuse anything. It just means like possible is not the same thing as well balanced.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if possible was the only clearing, like the only bar for something being like an appropriate difficulty level, then you know I want to be the guy would be as good as Super Mario World. You know, like it's possible.
What's more is that he's even like I don't think anyone can really argue that he's way harder than Gwyn was in Dark Souls 1.
Oh, yeah, no question.
And what's amazing,
I think he's way harder than Gwyn. Are you saying saying that he's not, or he's
you can't argue that he isn't hard, or that he isn't harder than Gwyn. Sorry,
gotcha.
Double negatives. But the thing that kind of doesn't make sense about that is that, you know, Gwyn, when we fight him, he's going sort of hollow. You know, he was the Lord of Sunlight and then he became the Lord of Cinder. We're fighting him after the decline. Whereas with the Nameless King, if you look at his face, he's pretty much a skeleton. So how is it that even though we're fighting him, you know, countless millennia after he actually did all these things and betrayed the gods and sided with the dragons, how is it that he's still so gosh darn strong?
Yeah, it has a weird feeling, and I'm going to get some shit for this, but it has an anime feeling to me of like just being like, can you imagine the ultimate warrior who trained in solitude for this long to become the greatest that has ever been, and then just like pumping up all his stats to make him like 10,000 Gokus worth of strong, you know? It's that. So when earlier we were talking about that exhaustion, like that is such a big part of why this doesn't work for me. Is that so? I beat him the first time through. I couldn't do it. I did it with help. The second time through, like I need to beat every boss, you know, and I just got exhausted. I'm like, I need this to be over. Summoned help, beat him, and I thought it was fine. Second play through the game, I beat him by myself because I want to at least do that for everybody once. And by the time I did it, like there is a sense of relief, which a lot of people get and they feel, and they're just like, man, it took me 1,000 tries, but it's so satisfying to do it. By the end, I was just so sick of like seeing his stupid face fighting that stupid dragon every time. Like everything about it, like alchemized to be uncool. Because I was so like all this bad will of just frustration. You know, like Kole, what you're saying, where you like use through your stamina, like you can't, blocking isn't really an option. Like, you know, so I try to like approach these games. If I'm having a hard time, I try to like, one thing the Dark Souls games do is they punish you for trying the same thing and expecting different results. So like I went in just playing my normal play style that I fight every boss with, wasn't working. So I was like, okay, let's load up on lightning equipment. Maybe I do need like a high stability shield. Let's go, you know, upgrade the shield that I wasn't using for the whole game. You know, put a bunch of time and kind of resources, like grind up to get the souls to get that shield, you know, good enough. Nope. His lightning attack that comes from the sky, all of his stuff does way too much damage to this shield, even with as much lightning defense as I can possibly give it. It does like way too much damage and does too much stamina.
Oh, and also this is a fight that has both lightning and fire damage in play. So good luck trying to
like trying to spec for it.
Yeah,
totally. And so then I was like, okay, I just need to learn his moves. Like this has to be a thing. Like this has to be like an Artorias thing. But it does the thing where multiple phases. And I brought this up in one place where I was talking about him, but Artorias, my favorite boss fight in the series, I think it hasn't been topped. Artorias has one move where he does that overhead somersault thing that can either happen 1, 2, or 3 times. There isn't signaling as to whether it's going to be 1, 2, or 3. It's kind of bullshit, right? Like you don't know how many it's going to be. You don't know when it's safe. Usually I just keep dodging until he stops moving just to be safe. Nameless King has several combos that you don't know how long they're going to be. So it's not just one of those kind of bullshit moves, it's many of those kind of bullshit moves. Like, is he going to charge past me and then immediately turn around and stab me, or is he going to rust and that's the time to attack him? Like, the signaling isn't there for how long these strings of attacks are going to go.
Yeah.
They can go infinitely because he has unlimited stamina.
Yeah.
But I don't know how far he's going to follow that chain.
He also, I think, varies up the timing of his attacks more than any other boss, in that, you know, you could have the roll timing perfectly for one attack, and then he does another attack that looks almost exactly the same, but like he hesitates for a split second.
Yeah.
And then you roll right into an attack, and then he combos, and then you're dead. Like, you basically can't make mistakes.
And that can be a good thing, right? Look at Champion Gunder. right? Like that's something that they did with him to very good effect. We heaped a lot of praise on Champion Gunder. I think that the way that they kind of syncopate his rhythm on this, in addition with the fact that he can just like go out of one combo and into another combo like immediately. The other side of this, he chews through your stamina. A big part of that is, okay, so I'm dodging, I'm trying to stay out of the way. Okay, I think I have an opening. Nope, I wasted my one thing, and then all of a sudden I'm comboed down. Like, I can't read
consequences.
him. Yeah.
Like, it's not just that. It's the difference between him and Gunder is that, like, Gunder doesn't kill you in one combo.
Right.
So, like, the fact that fucking up once is very, very probably death. And, like, something I've talked about before, and not everybody agrees with me, but I think sustained perfection is really boring.
Yeah.
Like, asking if the point of a boss is just like, yes, you have to figure it out, but you have to play perfectly for a long time, which is a big Bloodborne thing, actually. Like, that comes up with a lot of Bloodborne bosses where they have, like, way too much HP.
Abritus,
yeah. Yeah, Abritus. Like, play perfectly for a long time. I think that's not interesting as a design thing. That consequence really, really bums me out. It just, I like to, like, in a video game, like, I want to be able to make mistakes. Like the Souls games are really good at balancing your resources versus the number of mistakes you make, right? Like, that's kind of the idea behind it. That's the reason why DS1 Estus is the perfect healing system. It's like, I have this many mistakes I can make. These are my allowances. Whenever you set that allowance to 1, the game falls down. Like, one shot hit kills, one combo kills, anything like that. I'm never going to be into that.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't feel like it works for this kind of thing, because every one of those mistakes is a loading screen, an entire boss fight, between those things. And then just like, I got unlucky on the first combo right after I killed the King of the Storm. Oh, now I just get to try it again. Like, it's so tedious.
Yeah.
And even on the first phase, on the PS4 at least, whenever the King of the Storm flies up in the air and then the Nameless King does the Sunlight Spear, on the PS4 there's like 2 or 3 frames that get dropped every single time they do that attack. And so that's at least, in my experience, like 1 or 2 S's gone every single time they do that attack, because it's so hard to time your dodge when, the frame rate drops suddenly like that. So that adds to the frustration for me, definitely.
Yeah. To Gary's point about one hit kills not being fun at all. I really like dramatic fights that are kind of like a tug of war back and forth. You gain an inch, lose an inch, right? Like that kind of dramatic exchange always will work better for me, and that's again why Gunder works. That's why Artorias works. When you have that time to kind of like rally as things go along, when there is no give, when it's just a very slow ratchet in the direction of making progress against the boss, and if you slip up just once, if there's no give on your side, then all of a sudden all of the drama goes away, and I don't feel like I'm playing the same game that I signed up for. Yeah,
and that's where I land on it. Like I get. Go ahead, Kellum. What were you going to say?
Oh, sorry, just my last thing is I was just thinking about the mention of Bloodborne, and I feel like this boss would almost be better balanced if it were in Bloodborne. Because, like, imagine if you had quick stepping. Quick stepping, I feel, would be much more viable, plus, like, a weapon like the one of the 3 starting weapons. I've played Bloodborne for, like, 500 hours. The Saw Cleaver.
Cane or the Saw Cleaver, yeah.
If you had the Saw Cleaver and quick stepping, I feel like this boss wouldn't be that hard. Because that's how I fought the Orphan, and even though it took me 19 tries, like on the 20th one, once I was like, okay, just gonna quick step and then 1R1 and then I'm out of there. Quick step, 1R1, then I'm out of there. And I feel like, yeah, maybe that has something to do with the cross pollination of the dev teams and them working on multiple things at once. That somehow in like Bloodborne mode, which the way we're walking on the sky, sort of impossible physics, is very reminiscent to me of the Hunter's Nightmare in many ways. So I don't know. But no, yeah, I agree. I agree with you guys for the most part.
It's regain would make a big difference for it too, and it reminds me of like when I've heard people talk about this. Like this is a lot of people's favorite Souls boss, and it reminds me of people who, when we did the Chalice Dungeon episodes, who were just like, man, it is satisfying to kill Watchdog of the Old Lords, and it's just that I hate. This is something that I do, and I hate it about myself. So if you hate it about me, know that I hate it about myself as well. Where like. It's not that I don't trust people, that they're legitimately like they love it. I think their feelings are real. They do really like it, but the feeling of satisfaction and relief is papering over bad design. Like I don't like just because you feel very good about something after you beat it and it's very satisfying does not equal that it was well designed.
Well, and when people say, when people say, "Oh, well, I can't believe you had such a hard time with that boss," or "Oh, I killed that boss on the first try," they're completely ignoring the fact that the Souls games are like almost completely subjective in how you experience them, and that every single person will have, provided they're not, following a walkthrough to the letter, that everyone has their own unique play style that will play well against some bosses and not against others. Yeah. So I really don't think it's anyone's place to say, "Oh, you should have liked this boss more."
I'm surprised that you had trouble with ABC. All you really had to do was X, Y, Z. It's like, X, Y, and Z is usually like load up on a particular kind of arrow and wait 15 minutes.
Well,
or just like you should have known something about the mechanics that you couldn't possibly have known without looking it up.
Yeah, or make all of the decisions that a person made, up until that point, so that they go to that fight with the right context for making decisions in the moment.
Why can't you guys be me? What the heck?
Yeah, or even just like an actual physical thing that like is a skill. Like, hey, you just have to get excellent at parrying. Like, I'm pretty comfortable with my parrying in Souls. Like, I'm decent at it. But like that as a thing always drives me nuts. Like, hey, just just learn how to do this thing that like definitely doesn't come natural. Like it's a timing thing. It's a thing that is a difference in people's brains and hands that they maybe don't have that ability that, that you do quite as well. So it's always a frustrating.
Let's all say it together now.
Yeah.
Get good.
Yeah. That's never get good. And this is just, it's one of those things where it could have been like, have had fun kind of steamrolling him with summons because he is still like relatively hard. There's still that sense of consequence, but you can actually set back and heal. But it is unbalanced. And the DLC, the final boss for the DLC is as bad or worse to my mind. And this, what it feels like to me is that like it's From Software, they have their fans who are just really into like wanting this to just get harder as the series goes. But I don't, just the way that they're doing it is not my favorite. Like just adding, Dark Souls 3 already has a lot of bosses that just have a second health bar. This one would count as that as well with the first phase. They're just adding to it. Like DLC, 2 might have a boss with 4 health bars because why not? Why? This is the only way.
Was never what made Dark Souls good. And you're right in that I feel like a lot of the times, FromSoft seems to get caught up in its own notoriety in that respect.
It definitely, this feels like an example of that to me. Like it's an optional boss. It can be like the ruby weapon. I get that it can be this challenging. I just wish it was challenging in like a fun way. Like I'm a big defender of Fume Knight. Like that is probably previously considered the hardest boss.
Oh, Fume Knight's so good.
But it doesn't take that long to get good. Like again, provided everyone's different, but when it finally clicks for you with the Fume Knight, he's, he can be beaten, and in very few Estus as well. But with this boss, I feel like, I fought this boss just as many, if not more times than the Fume Knight, and I can kill the Fume Knight, pretty much every time. But with this boss, no.
It's throwing, and if that one doesn't work for you, if people listening to this are just like, Dark Souls 2 doesn't count. Like I love Orphan of Kos. Like I ended up really loving that boss fight. I really like Lady Maria. That's one of my all-time favorite boss fights. Like you can do difficulty in a way that isn't just ramp up every stat 1,000, and just like this boss just has unending unstaggerable. Unstaggerable, does enough damage. Every single time you get hit, it's 70% of your health bar if you get caught in anything, because that just means that you have to heal, but like half of your opportunities to heal or attack aren't those things. They just look like them because he has attacks that are purposely deceptive to look like that. Like I get that it is possible to learn this and do it, and like I've done it. I got through him, but I can take no joy in it, and it just it bums me out in an area I otherwise really like. Because the actual base, the moment to moment gameplay, the actual ground level troops in this are actually pretty good. And the aesthetics of this area are excellent. And even this boss like looks pretty great. Like he looks like a cool dude. Again, it's a little bit anime for me, but he looks really cool. It's just like that. It's just that tuning that just like doesn't work for me.
I filed this guy away in the Ancient Dragon. box or whatever is like, okay, I've done this enough to where I feel like I know what's going on. However, there is no reality in which, putting the time in to actually finish this will give me any kind of positive experience. Nothing about this can be redeemed. In my mind, I'm just throwing good time after bad, won't feel good beating it. Won't feel good saying I beat it, Yeah.
Yeah. At some point, the only, if next time you're in Portland, I should queue up a save that's at Dark Lurker. Because out of all those bosses where you've kind of thrown in the towel, that's the one I want you to fight, because it's a really good boss fight.
I know it's a good boss fight. I just haven't beaten it.
Yeah, well, it's a pain in the dick to get to, and you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to it. It sucks.
I've gotten close. I know it. I've got it in my head. I just can't do it.
It's pretty frustrating. There's a shadow of a cool boss in here, like a cool duel, but I don't think this is it. But I mean, people have already written in. People will write in and stuff with dissent, I'm sure. Anywho, so once you actually beat this guy, he falls down to the ground, and we get to pick up his shit and learn a lot about what this is. And this is another thing where this kind of holistically bums me out, because this is Gwen's firstborn.
Yeah.
And if you look at the soul, you can even see that. I like how the soul images in this often sort of contain subtle lore hints. And I don't know if this is even a lore hint at all, but we were talking about the storm and the cyclone. It appears as though, just like you guys brought up the comparison of Ornstein and Smo earlier, just as, when you kill Ornstein first, then you get the soul of Smo and vice versa. In this case, it seems like he sort of absorbed, the soul of the King of the Storm was absorbed into his own, because if you look at the image, you can see that there's, just the normal soul graphic, and then there's sort of a cyclone around the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's two of them fused like that.
Yeah.
Sort of like the Twin Prince's soul as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dual kind of soul.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Way into it. I'm also into Solaire not being the Gwen's firstborn. I like that he just continued to be like a regular dude.
Or a number of intolerable theories about what happened to Solaire.
I mean, just see, I'm sorry, I'm just talking about his provenance.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand, apparently I didn't think I was a minority on this, and I think I am. I ended up actually liking Solaire being the firstborn quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I did too.
I it's because it felt like one, I really like the idea of him having a son and a daughter. One is the sun and one is the moon. Just kind of worked for me. And it kind of made it added, he seems like too important of a character to not be significant in the world. I understand the significance of insignificance too, the kind of he's just a regular man. That's what makes him special. I get that too. It worked for me though. Him being the kind of amnesiac son of this, made a complete picture for me. And it was also a big, that's the first, I'm not the first person to make this observation, but some of the backlash against this is that that was the, one of the first community lore breakdown things, or breakthroughs. That was kind of a thing where a lot of people worked together to kind of come to those conclusions and put together the clues to make that fit.
Yeah. And
it still kind of fits. It still would make sense if this wasn't just a period at the end of the sentence, so that kind of bums me out. I accept it. It's just not, I just don't like it as much.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to something that Vadi said again in the Untended Graves episode, that when you go to the Untended Graves, or after you defeat Osiros, or however the heck you pronounce his name, you go sort of into that antechamber part behind the boss room, and something that Vati said was that, basically at this point, everything you think you know about Dark Souls is challenged. And I think it's probably fitting given the fact that we get the gesture to come to this place when we go there. But I think that also applies here in many instances, and especially, everything you think you know. I was sort of halfway in and out, but I leaned more closely towards Solaire being the son's firstborn. Just because, like you said, it seemed to make sense. But then, after my playthrough, when everyone yelled at me for not realizing who that was, I was like, oh, shite. That is interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. It's not a war crime that it's not the right thing. At the most, what falls under for me is in the category of like answers Dark Souls 3 gives to questions I wasn't asking.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't playing this being like, man, who was the firstborn? And what they actually filled it in with, while kind of cool in a cartoonishly metal sense, to me, is not like, doesn't feel very Soulsy to me in a lot of ways. Like some of this kind of like the ancient path of warriors stuff, like him rebelling during that war with the dragons, like the war with the dragons was fine. Like I didn't want additional detail to that conflict.
There was already a betrayal in that.
Yeah.
Like
it just muddies up. It feels like, a revisionist history thing that doesn't make Dark Souls 1 cooler, and it doesn't make Dark Souls 3 cooler to me. So I just don't know.
Maybe it was just Miyazaki watching lore videos after releasing Dark Souls 1 going, shit, I need to set the record straight on this.
I really wonder if he watches
really
that
the only
stuff.
explanation I can come up with.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating to like if he doesn't watch that stuff, set him down and like show him like after this is no longer a thing. Like if it's not an economic concern, it's like 10 years out, and be like, hey, this is the stuff that people were thinking. Like how much of this is on the right track?
Yeah, well, he said in the interview in the Bloodborne guide that if he was asked, he wouldn't say. Like he refuses to say because he wants everyone to have their own interpretation, which I really admire.
Yeah, I like that too. As
frustrating as it can be when trying to tease certain things out.
Yeah. So this is what happened. This is the Nameless King, probably named Sen. I will buy that. Even though it doesn't match the naming convention, but whatever. Gwen. He was on the side of Gwen, decided to defect, being the second betrayal in that, and join the side of the dragons. That is why there's that thing where it talks about the firstborn son and how he was expunged for losing the annals of history. That is a mistranslation thing. Yep. He was expunged from the annals of history. Yeah. So that is a frustrating thing too, because like before that, it was just like, oh, somebody lost like the records. Like, that maybe that was a little bit silly, but like that was what we had to go with, which seemed like something an amnesiac kind of maniac might do. But instead it was somebody who was expunged from the records because he sided with the dragons. Yeah. And apparently formed this monastery about turning people into dragons.
Yeah, and probably maybe started the whole Path of Dragon thing. Although, there's not an awful lot of evidence or anything linking this to Ash Lake, where you get that at the start.
I mean, this was clearly not the idea until just now. Yeah,
and then he just like we said, he's lifelong bros with this Storm King, this Drake, who's more bird-like than dragon-like, really. And they rolled together until you ruined it, you monster.
And I referenced it before. Some people think that is Ornstein turning into a dragon. I will put the video in the link in the description or in the show notes about like one or two of the theories about that. I watched some of those. At first, my idea, I was pretty scofful of that because I don't like the idea very much. But then once I kind of detached myself from this area where I'm like, it doesn't really matter whether I like it. It's like, it's surprisingly plausible. It's more plausible than Solaire being soup. It's more plausible than Solaire being a centipede.
Yeah.
So like, it's not actually that bad. Maybe Ornstein defected, became a dragon, and became the Storm King.
Yeah, that's super weird though, because Ornstein is still, I mean, I guess he's an illusion there in the service. How does this reconcile with the fact that we're 1,000 years after, or untold ages after
Dark Souls 2?
Dark Souls 2, when he was decrepit and abyss touched.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the idea that he went after that and then became a dragon afterwards, and dragons can live forever. Also the fact that this, only in a number is this 1,000 years after Dark Souls 2.
Yeah. I mean, it's
in real life, it's about 10 minutes after. Well, just and the fact that the game has done a very bad job of making this feel like it's a long time after Dark Souls 1.
Yeah. And also, who knows where we're at in time when we're here, etc.
That's 100%. Yeah. So maybe this is Ornstein. The bits of evidence for this is we find Ornstein's armor. It's not on a corpse, right? So it's something that he definitely discarded. And he left the ruined cathedral to search for the Nameless King. So he either showed up here, got naked for some reason or another, and was either slayed or turned into one of these dragons, possibly the Storm Drake, possibly one of the wyverns from before, possibly one of the bros we find worshiping in the main chamber. So he's here and he's naked. That's what we know.
So,
He's here to party.
Like,
he's here to party.
He brought the party. What other lore stuff is there to this? Is that really it? Do we have anything else?
Well, with Smo, like the item description for Smo stuff says that he was the last knight left guarding the ruined cathedral, and I do seem to recall in Dark Souls 1, I didn't add any of this to my notes, so I could be remembering this wrong, but I do seem to recall in Dark Souls 1 that it was said that he couldn't be a knight because he ate people.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be a whole lot of revisionist history going on here.
Yeah, I mean, Smo was an executioner.
Really, and it's said in this game also that he's a knight, which, you know, I don't know how much of that is meant to be, you know, an illustration of, you know, yes, these are just the vagaries of history. So kind of that thing I was talking about right at the start of the podcast, or if it's meant to actually say this is what actually happened, and that, you know, the illusions you fought were just, you know, again, illusions. So I'm not sure. And I think if anything, they probably just ignored, Dark Ornstein from Dark Souls 2, because I could never really figure out what the heck he was doing there. At least me personally, and I've never really read a satisfying lore theory about it, about his presence there, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was just retconned as well. Like, I think that and the kind of inconsistency with Snow and the fact Smo, and the fact that there's no inconsistency in Snow, like he's the informer. But the inconsistency with Smo, whether he is a knight, those things, it feels like it is just kind of retconned in favor of telling the story, you know, about the son, which again has this sense of kind of like melodrama that rings a little false to me. But you know, a lot of people like it. I don't want to take the joy away. So, and in the end, it's like despite not liking either boss in this area or the lore of the end boss, like I actually like this area.
Oh, this area is fantastic.
It's like very beautiful. The actual design of the levels is really great. The way the enemies and encounters are designed is very good. It's a lot like the last episode where the actual level design and encounter design is really, really good. It's just where it fits into the world that like kind of bums me out. It's kind of like final thoughts. What, Callum, what are your kind of wrap up thoughts on Archdragon Peak?
I like the area a lot. Much like you two, I think I'm a little bit. I like the boss a little bit more than the two of you do, but I do share many of your frustrations. I would echo many of the sentiments that you've expressed here, in just how somewhat unreasonable the boss is in its difficulty. But I think I've said pretty much everything I have to say. So cool area. One that's really tough, at least my first playthrough, to do at the tail end of a like 30-hour series of blind playthrough. But yeah, I really like it, and I'm glad that I was asked to be on, because it was an area I hadn't really put a heck of a lot of thought into until you guys asked me to be on. And I did a bunch of research in the last week or two, and if nothing else, I really, really enjoy the end of Hawkwood's quest line. I thought that was really, really cool.
No, I'll echo all the thoughts. This is a very well designed area. I like the enemies, things like that. I think that it benefits a lot from being so apart from everything, separated, distinct.
It's almost like the Canehurst of this game in some ways.
A little bit, yeah. And so I think that covers up for a lot of sins, both thematically and kind of like play wise. And I'm gonna say, before this conversation, I never really put Hawkwood into as much context as we kind of established here. And fuck yeah, Hawkwood. You know.
Yeah. Go Hawkwood, man.
Good on you. Got your group back.
He's a good boy. It's good. It's just and you know, I'll be fair too and say that like some of my crankiness about the boss stuff definitely comes from that first blush of just kind of being a little bit over, you know, like ending a game with like a big optional challenge thing. Like it would have been a good thing for like, you know, not immediately going into New Game Plus, like going here a little bit later, you know, instead of kind of like, you know, banging my head up against the wall. Like if I had, you know, it wasn't even like I was playing for the show or anything either. It was just like I wanted to play the game. If I had like maybe put it down for like a week or two, maybe I'd come at it and feel a little bit better about it. But just that first impression is not erasable and was very negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really hard to disentangle the boss encounter from, the point in the game where you will invariably be when you fight it for the first time. Is because it's not like Gunstar Heroes where it's just part of a whole boss rush stage, and you can kind of just come to it at various different points. And which you guys have talked throughout the series, throughout the season about the lack of sequence breaking, that is kind of disappointing. So I won't go into that, but just again for me, like I came to this boss for the first time after the end of a very long blind playthrough that had taken up more of my time than I had anticipated it would. And so I was just, frustrated and kind of done at that point. Like I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't, very difficult given the context to enjoy the boss as much as I perhaps otherwise ought to have. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of highs, a lot of lows here. Callum, can you remind people online where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, you can just search for me on YouTube, Aegon of Astora, Aegon of Astora. I also stream occasionally, but not very often on Twitch. Same name, just with underscores instead of spaces.
Yeah, and recommended. You should definitely check out your stuff because it is good.
Thanks very much.
So thank you to Callum, aka Aegon of Astora.
Yeah,
for that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a good capper on all of this. I don't know who we have lined up or who we're going to get for the DLC for Ashes of Ariandel. You do?
I do.
Oh, dang! What are we getting?
Dave Riley from the Fast Karate for the Gentleman podcast.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Also a games reviewer in his own right. It was suggested, one of our community members, Lion Yeti, suggested him because somebody in my Ask FM posted his review of Ashes of Ariandel, which is on point as hell. Like it is the review that I read of that I agreed with the most. Yeah. Which again, boy, I should stop apologizing for being myself, but I thought the DLC really sucks. More or less, I mean, it's like a C minus.
Right.
But and a lot of the reasons I don't like it, he picked up on. I'm not trying to just create an echo chamber, but I also didn't want to start a fight where like we just have somebody who's like, no, it's amazing, and it's like, well, and then the entire episode is us just saying alternate things. So we'll talk about the good and the bad. They probably won't line up exactly. Right. So both sides will be represented, I'm sure.
Yes. So I don't know if it was Mr. Riley, but somebody from the Fast Karate for the Gentleman podcast donated to Duckstream.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
that's if it was Dave, thank you. If it was someone else, also thank you.
Yeah,
So that's going to be in 2 weeks where we talk about the Ashes of Ariandel in its entirety. So it might be a little bit of a longer episode. It's not a huge area, but there are multiple bosses.
Yes. If you want to write in about that, we're still taking those responses. That is at Duckfeed.tv/contact.
A couple of people have asked me, reached out specifically about what's going to happen with the show. Join us on Facebook. Yes. I've been talking about that. I've been soliciting kind of what people would want. I have our plans for the immediate future and the off season kind of outlined
up through like the first quarter of 2017. Yeah.
So we're not going anywhere is the short answer, but I don't want to just say all that stuff again. So the details are there, and you should follow us on Facebook anyway. So that is facebook.com/bonfireside chat.
Yes.
And you can see what we're doing after Ashes of Ariandel and the end game kind of episode. We'll also, DLC 2 will obviously just get slotted in as soon as we can. So once it comes out, we have a chance to play it, and we can put it between games we're doing for the off season.
Yes.
If you want to, we're going to be coming up not too long on our first episode of Bonfireside Chat After Dark, which is going to come up. This is a show about kind of listener prompts, questions, kind of generalities of the Soul series from Software, and some gaming in general, I'm sure will sneak in there. And that's going to be coming up. If you want a chance to be a guest on that show, the way to do that is supporting us on patreon.com. If you go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv, you can check out all our rewards. People have been very generous lately. We really do appreciate that. And that is where you go to join the Undead Legion of followers.
Yes.
Our Farron's keeping me in food.
Our Farron's keeping me from being evicted.
Yes.
Yep. And it's because of that we're able to do new and exciting shows like Days of Future Cast, Jeremy and Gary's I almost said exploration, but that's dumb. Just Gary and Jeremy's podcast, yes, about the X-Men animated series, or something that just started up here, Radio Free Midworld, which is our podcast about the Dark Tower series of books by Stephen King.
Yeah. And coming soon, we recently reached another goal for Patreon. We're going to start Talk About the Passion, which is a show about REM, the band. Mm-hmm. Not the sleep, not the letters. The band, chronological exploration. We got to strike those words from our vocabulary.
Yep.
Of the band REM between me and Kole. That's going to be a real blast. I don't know, if people here have really branched out to like our other premium shows, like Try This and stuff, but I really like talking about music with you.
Me too.
And I think it will be, it'll be really good.
Yeah. In fact, in the preamble to this, when we were in the green room, I bought a biography of the band so I could read that and be well read and shit. I'm
going to do that too.
Yeah.
We should we get different ones or the same ones? What makes the most sense?
Let's see here. It depends. Not many of them are available on Kindle, and only one of them has above 4 stars.
I will probably get a physical book just because it's easier. So I will just look around and find one that has a high rating. And if it's the same one, great. If not, also okay.
Yes.
So yeah, we have that. And we have other, new milestone goals coming up. So just check out all that stuff. We really do appreciate your support, and you get something for it. It's not we'd feel bad just taking your money for nothing.
Right.
So we want to give back.
Yeah. And one of those things is certain people at certain tiers get to be thanked.
Yeah, everyone likes hearing their name on air, not you least of all. So let's do it. So very special thanks to Stephen Witten.
Yes. Another one to Charles Pierce. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Charles Pierce. Will Owens, my friend, and Chris. Yep. Will is fantastic. Thank you, Will.
Yep. We had him on early in the series, right?
Yeah. Will's been on the show before.
Yes, there we go. It's 3 years. More than 3 years. Good God. Brad Carey.
Absolutely. Brad Carey, also a stalwart, excellent cat, Brad Carey, as I'm friends with on Facebook, see lots of pictures of cats. Mm-hmm. Frederick Rosenvik, also a longtime fan.
Yeah, from Sweden.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. I love when international people show up.
And just so this doesn't become... Oh, go ahead.
Noted villain.
Oh, yeah. God, I didn't want to. I wanted to stop right before him. Because we want to do about 5 of these an episode, but it's appropriate to mention this now. Noted villain Brian Wade, aka the man made entirely of deceit, who pulled the rug out from under me and dropped me into a manhole of Star Wars.
Yes, you know that snake person statue at the end of the DLC, and how you look inside it, it's just full of lies.
Yep.
That's what happens once you open up Brian's creamy skin. So Brian, and that was during, as Kole mentioned, Duckstream, which we recently did. I want to thank everybody who's listening to this who helped us with that.
Yeah.
That exceeded our wildest expectations.
Beyond anything that we would have ever thought reasonable to ask for.
Yes. So you are very generous. Whatever part we had in cultivating this community, I'm very proud. And you heard, at the beginning of the episode and the beginning of shows in the network, this time we're not going to go into full-on politics mode because of the election, but we're reaffirming our place as, accepting of all people, races, genders, sexualities, creeds, any of those things. We accept and love everyone. Mm-hmm. And we will not tolerate harassment in our spaces.
Nope.
People for any of those reasons under no circumstances. So we, this is going to be, this is a one part of kind of a general perspective on this stuff that is not so much about politics as it is about human rights and kind of human kindness. Yep. And this was a big part of it, and you guys helped with that.
Yes.
Immensely.
Very much so.
So very much thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else. I think that we have wrung it out.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us as we wrap up the end of this game as we're getting near the end. So really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to what comes next, and I think you guys will dig it too.
Yeah, cool. So
until next time.
Until next time, I will be the true dragon.
Umbasa.
Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
I'll just let you have it. Fuck it.